Cue the music. The Mario Kart series houses many unique courses. Most of them are pretty good, some of them are bad. Sometimes the course design itself is what makes for a bad experience, or it's the game's mechanics that bring the enjoyability of them down. When the series formula became more standardized, the course count has consistently been 32 since 2005, which is about half of the series. The release of Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U was no exception, 32 courses. After a little while, Nintendo decided to release DLC for Mario Kart 8, bumping up the track count to 48. A few years later, the Switch's release followed shortly by Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, an enhanced port of the original game on a console with a much larger install base. The upside is, more people get to experience Mario Kart 8 outside of it only being on the Wii U. The downside are that Deluxe didn't bring new courses to the table outside of Battle Mode. It has its fair share of additions, but we will not be covering those in this video. The other downside is, while it wasn't immediately apparent at the time, this port meant that we would not see a new Mario Kart title for a very long time. By the way, before anyone says it, I am aware of Mario Kart World. That wasn't revealed when I wrote this. This video isn't about Mario Kart World, it's about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Years later, Nintendo announced the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Pass, adding an additional 48 courses to the game, skyrocketing the count to a record-shattering 96! A maddeningly absurd number that no Mario Kart game has ever gone close to. As the months went by, we were drip-fed by the Booster Pass content all the way until it was all released. Now, this video has been a very long time coming. In the time it took for this monstrosity to brew, I've been taking a look at others' thoughts, and people have some interesting takes on their course ratings. I'm also using the word interesting as a synonym for bad, terrible, trash, god-awful, and dog shit. And I swear, if I hear one more son of a bitch slander of one of the Toad courses, I will piss on Toad. I will do it. I will piss on his head and I will force you to watch. In this first video of the Mario Kart 8 retrospective series, I'll be taking on the impossible task of looking at each and every one of these tracks, evaluating, and then grading them myself. The grades will be based on a fairly objective overview with only a slight amount of my own personal bias. And what's that look for? Yes, I'm a cat. Before we get started, I would like to establish a framework for how these courses will be rated. It might disappoint you, but I'm not going to go from worst to best or best to worst. Instead, I'll be covering the tracks presented within the cups in-game all the way from base game left to right. The Booster Pass DLC will also be covered in the same way. Courses will be graded based on a set criteria, with the criteria being stuff like course design, how well designed is the layout, what's the track trying to accomplish, and does it do it well? Is there anything unique about the design? How terrible is the last turn shortcut, and so on. Theme. What's the course's theme? Environment. How inspired is it? Is it visually appealing? And finally, we have playability. At first, it might seem like a fancier way of saying course design, but this is more specifically referring to how flexible the layout is, as in if there is a clear racing setup that suits the course best. This also takes into account 200cc. I know some other lesser beings may opt out of considering that mode, but these people are weak, bad, and quite stupid. I believe the most ideal playability should allow for most setups to navigate through without much issue. And most important of all, how fun is it to race on? The gradings will go like this, from top to bottom. Triple S tier. This is a ranking reserved for some of the most brightest shining examples of a great course. This is not an award that is given out lightly. S. While it's not as prestigious as Triple S, it's a track that's nearly perfect in every way with some very minor blemishes. A tier. A great model of what a good course is. There might be some negatives, but overall, there isn't anything too offensive about it. Just as long as it's mostly fun, A rank will be awarded. B. It's a decent track. Maybe it's just boring, or there's more than a few issues that prevent it from being the top of its class. Maybe there's something about it that prevents it from being fun most of the time. C. About average. It's not a track I would pick personally, but sometimes it can be fun. Oftentimes C ranks are bland, forgettable, and just have some flaws that prevent it from being worthwhile. D. There are major issues with the course that prevent it from being a good time. E. Same as D, except the flaws are severe enough that it's basically guaranteed a bad time. F. Irredeemably bad. There are no good qualities whatsoever about an F-tier track. These are tracks that shouldn't have left the design stage. The overall grading is not determined by the other criteria. It's not a science, but it is the most important and defining part of the grade. Sometimes I will give or dock points due to a specific reason that I will probably note on the results. Sometimes a score will have a plus or minus sign next to it as well. Is this grading system overbloated? Probably, but it is what I'm sticking with. As a bonus, any course with one notable unique aspect, good or bad, will receive an award completely made up by yours truly. For me to be clear about what I'm judging, I will briefly go over what I personally think makes a good Mario Kart track. Any racing track in general, to be honest. So what does make for a good track? What makes for bad tracks? In racing, I think that, generally speaking, a good course should be perfectly sight readable. For easier tracks, any player should be able to respond accordingly to the track's various turns on the very first drive-thru. Maybe there could be a shortcut here or there, maybe they're a bit more hidden and require prior knowledge or raw reaction to take advantage of them effectively, but mainly, easy tracks need to keep it simple. A complicated track should be reserved for more advanced racers. Not entirely sight-readable by someone who's just starting out, but if someone is already familiar with the game, they should be able to get through it without many problems. The thing is, it really doesn't matter how beginner or expert a track can be. What matters is all in the design. Look, you can make your track as basic or as complex as you like, but it's very important for an easy track to still be competitive, despite its simplicity. And harder courses should be competitive for advanced players. If a beginner player is left behind, they're just gonna have to learn how to play better. A bad track that's complex is one that all but requires previous knowledge or muscle memory to get through it. The turns are too unpredictable and sharp, there might be too many hazards, maybe parts of the track just don't work out because the mechanics are too close together or too far apart in some sections, or it's just not well made in other areas. I should reinforce that these guides for good course design do apply for virtually all racing games, but Mario Kart can get away with far more extreme designs. Obviously, it's not a simulation game or grounded in reality. Even still, some of what is in Mario Kart pushes the threshold, but one thing is for sure, I also understand that what I think is good for a Mario Kart course is also subjective. You will hear me talk about shortcuts. A lot. And in my opinion, shortcuts that break the course aren't good. You can disagree with me and argue that it is good design, and your opinion is valid. Just know that means you're bad at the game. With all that said and done, I think it's finally time to look at courses. I blabbed on and on for long enough, and I'm not going to stop talking anytime soon, so what are we waiting for? Start the damn game. The first cup is the Mushroom Cup. There isn't a whole lot to say, these are your basic introductory tracks, so if you're expecting something mind-blowing, then just go play Split Second instead. First up is Mario Kart Stadium, the very first Nitro track in the game and the very first track you likely played. This course's goal is to show off the brand new, spiffy, anti-gravity gimmick, and they're not holding back because that's one hell of a twist. Unfortunately, the game's main gimmick doesn't really do anything for me. I can hardly tell it's happening when I'm playing. The player bump boost thing, yeah, I don't know, it seems like it boosts both players, and not by much either. Same can be said for the boost diamond thingies. I don't know, I guess it's neat, but I think a lot more could have been done with it. The track itself, it's fine as a first course. It doesn't do anything too special, like something you might have found in a previous Mario Kart game's first circuit. It's pretty bare bones. The only notable thing is that it's nighttime. It's in a huge stadium and there's fireworks. It seems like Mario took some notes from Wario and Waluigi and decided to make his own stadium course. It's even in the name. The one thing I don't like about this course is the shortcut at the last turn. And be prepared to hear that a lot because boy, I sure hate those last turn shortcuts. I sure hope they don't show up too often. I do like the glider trick you can do on 200cc though, and it's harmless since everyone can learn it. Overall, Mario Kart Stadium gets a B. It's perfectly fine, but it doesn't do anything too crazy. The shortcut at the end prevents it from getting an A. Next is Water Park. Yeah, it's okay. There's not really anything that stands out. The loop does showcase the anti-gravity a lot better than Mario Kart Stadium. It's a great pick to be in the first cup, but man, I feel like this track is really uninspired. Yes, it's a theme park, but it's not as vibrant as it should be in my opinion. There's a lot more you could do with a theme park style course, especially with anti-gravity, but it just feels like a standard track. It's designed well enough to be serviceable, it doesn't have any major flaws, but it does nothing to stand out on its own. It has little personality or identity. It gets a B-. Oh man, Sweet Sweet Canyon. The things I have to say about you are not very sweet. It's not the greatest, and by far the worst in the cup. First, I'd like to know, I didn't play much Mario Kart Wii, and I never played Mario Kart 7. Somebody please let me know, have these cannon glider segments always been this bad? There's a good chance you'll get hit because it bottlenecks everyone into a tight space. You can also throw items while being launched, which is one of the worst things they put in the game. I don't care. I'm saying it. This is one of the worst mechanics in the whole game. The fact that you can get hit, unavoidably mind you, and Lakitu can just sometimes take you further back shows how unpolished the whole thing is. I don't remember much of Double Dash from back when it came out, and I'm aware that game has cannons too, but I can't ever recall being hit mid-flight. If that's not bad enough, the rest of the course doesn't do a whole lot to redeem itself. After a small spiraling turn and taking a dunk in Urine Lake, there's a split path, and I honestly can't tell you if one of them is faster. Both paths have a tight space issue where items just ping-pong off the walls right into you, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. The only sort of redeeming factor is going off the split roads and onto the last turn. That has a nice feel to it if you can pull it off cleanly. To seal off the shit Sunday is that there's a shortcut right at the last turn. You can use it with the mushroom, which means skill is pointless, and all that you need are good items to win. And that's the whole race. Have fun. How about no? This course gets a D. Well, it's a D+. 3 stages in, and we're already almost teetering on bad tier tracks. Let's just hope the next one doesn't suck. Thwomp Ruins caps off this cup, and wow, it's the best track in the entire cup. It's the best track so far, which is a nice refresher after how bad the last one was. Presentation-wise, this course isn't the most unique, but it's definitely the most fun to race on. It's not too hard, but it isn't that easy either. If you're any good, you'll likely never get hit by any of the hazards present on the course. Being the last race in the cup, this is the first race to have a bit of a dare in it. On the last section, before the glider, there's a ramp that's precariously perched off-track that you can jump on and do tricks from. You're not required to have a mushroom to pull it off either, and it's a nice preparation for what's to come when it comes to harder stunts that'll show up later on. There isn't much in terms of a mushroom shortcut towards the end of the lap. Instead, they put one at the very beginning of the race, which is a very welcome twist. Thwomp Ruins is an easy S tier. Gameplay-wise, there's nothing offensive about it. It's perfectly playable with almost every cart combo, and it's a nice challenge for 200cc. It's a very well-designed track all around. Mushroom Cup gets a B+. Oh yeah, I'm grading the cups as a whole too. It would have a better score if the first 2 courses were interesting, and if it didn't have the blemish that is Sweet Sweet Canyon, it would be an easy A tier. The second cup starts strong with Mario Circuit, specifically Mario Kart 8's Nitro Mario Circuit. I swear you can get these things a dime a dozen these days. This course would otherwise be unremarkable, but it's shaped as a Mobius strip, which is also like an 8 shape. That's cute. Mario Circuit is just plain fun to race on, although for the 5th race in the game, they're a little heavy on the course hazards. I'm not a huge fan of the piranha plants. I don't believe this one at the start adds anything except unnecessary difficulty, and once again, there's a shortcut at the end that rears its ugly head. It's not too damaging of a shortcut though, at least on 150cc. I'll take this time to talk about course flow. It's mainly a 200cc thing, but any well-designed course should be satisfying for a skilled player to coast through at high speeds. If you're able to outrun a blue shell or red shell for an extended period of time, and you can see me doing this at times in the gameplay footage, then odds are it's a well enough designed track, within reason, of course. In this case, like I said, piranha plants can disrupt flow. Being able to drift through this Mario circuit is pretty fun. If it had a few tweaks here and there, like improving the visibility on hazards and placing a shortcut elsewhere besides the end of the track, it would be an A tier grade. It's a B+. It's a great course overall for sure, but some setbacks prevent it from being truly great. Toad Harbor is a treat. This is one of those courses that seems difficult on the first go, but once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad. I have to mention at the very start, you can boost off this ramp for an item and then get a second item right off the bat. I'm not sure if this is intentional, but any skilled player should be rewarded for doing more risky maneuvers. This is only on 150cc though. The market section is full of objects you can bump into. There's pillars and there's barrels that sometimes spit out mushrooms if hit, but you can also take the top path if you don't go for your second item. Immediately afterwards is a split road. One is slightly faster, but there's no item. The other isn't as direct, but you can get more defense or offense, depending on how the devil is feeling today. Once you're up here, there's a great section where you can make another choice. Continue on the road or drive on the wall. There's a double item box at one end of both paths, though I think the road one is slower. Right after all of that, there's a downward hill part where there's literally a race to the finish line. You can use the trams to trick off of if the opportunity presents itself, otherwise stay far away from them. And once again, this otherwise outstanding course is somewhat besmirched by a minor shortcut at the end. I'm always a big fan of using San Francisco as a racetrack, even if that would be highly illegal in real life. But who cares? It's Mario Kart! Mario can break all the law he wants. This course also introduces another aspect of the game that I wish every course had in it: other vehicles. Well, trolleys aren't really vehicles in the traditional sense, but the main thing I'm getting at is that they block player-thrown items, in particular red shells. The only thing stopping the red shell from hitting a player are dynamic objects, and traffic is the best sort to use against it. Other hazards and using walls are way too risky and not worth it in my opinion. I'm in favor of a player having agency, with the ability of making split-second decisions. There's never really a clear path that's the most optimal one. Everything in this track is a race-by-race basis, and I enjoy it for that. Other than that one issue, I really don't think this course has any major faults whatsoever. It's an S tier. Twisted Mansion is up next, and I don't have a lot to say about it. Mario Kart is no stranger to Boo-themed levels, it just doesn't stand out. It's not particularly visually interesting either. Immediately, the track starts off with the fork in the road, and then there's a mushroom-required shortcut, and then it goes into another split. The only kind of cool part about this track is that there's an upper and lower floor right after, though I usually never take the low path unless I have to. The upper path's turn is very sharp too, and I don't feel like they execute it as well as it should be, and right after that, there's a mushroom shortcut to finish off the lap, and it's a pretty bad one. Not only does it let you skip the main hazards, being the hammering statues, you basically just skip having to deal with anybody else, so it can be a free win for people who didn't really earn it. I don't have a lot more to say. It's a C+ tier. It doesn't do anything terrible, but it could have been a lot better. I would like to see a more spooky themed Mario Kart tracks. Shy Guy Falls, on the other hand, is a ton of fun to race on. Going up the waterfall and going back down is a better representation of a roller coaster than the actual water subcoaster from the previous cup. There's a few minor shortcuts that require a mushroom at the end, and the whole end part opens the player up to getting whacked by potentially anything. It's pretty claustrophobic. It's a great course though. It does an upper and lower level split much better than Twisted Mansion. It's a gorgeous track too, even if it doesn't have anything that truly stands out thematically. I find it to be a really fun course. I give it an A+ tier. I wish I had more to say about it. Flower Cup earns an A- tier overall. It has some of my preferred tracks to race on all in one place. Even if it seems like I grade them lower, it's a worthy successor to Mushroom Cup. Can Star Cup do better? Star Cup kicks off with Sunshine Airport. This is a really good course in my opinion. The best part of the course for me is the theme. It's implied this airport is somehow connected to Isle Delfino. Not only is it called Sunshine Airport, there's also imagery of shine sprites from Super Mario Sunshine. There's a very easy to miss Easter egg where the intercom ambience actually mentions different racetracks in the game. It helps in making Mario Kart 8 feels all like it exists in one cohesive world, and I adore this sort of thing. I also really like the low-flying airplanes present in the stage. They don't really do much in terms of the actual course gameplay, but that little touch of dynamic background elements adds a lot for me. The anti-gravity road in the sky could have been spiced up in my opinion. What I think would have worked well was adding a little bit of verticality with a split path, one above and one below, but it doesn't hurt the stage a ton. Maybe you could have added a drop in the middle of the road too that you need to avoid. The last shortcut doesn't do much damage either. They also brought back mushrooms popping out of boxes from Toad Harbor. I'm not entirely sure how useful this stuff is, at least for a player like me who's usually in the top 3 racers, but it's a nice thing. I don't have any problems giving this one an S tier grade. It's just a damn good course. A fine example of Mario Kart 8 at its absolute best. Dolphin Shoals. It's okay. It's hard to top what came before it, and a little fun fact, the intercom from Sunshine Airport mentioned this course by name. The other course mentioned was Sweet Sweet Canyon. Thankfully, this is much better than that one. I think the theme could have used some work. It's really just a vanilla beach and underwater cave theme. A bit more work could have been done here to make it more visually interesting, and I'm not saying that it looks bad based on pure graphics, I'm just saying it's fairly cut and dry. The race itself is not something I'd call boring. It's a little difficult on 200cc if you're not well equipped. The cave part is cool, it has a few interesting routes on 200cc too. Tricking off the eel is really fun, but dangerous on 200, and the vortex at the end looks really cool. Take a look at it coming from the opposite direction. Give us a reverse mode, Nintendo, please. There's yet another mushroom shortcut at the end. It's difficult to tell how much of an advantage it really is because I legitimately do not know how speed works in this stupid game. Yes, that's for real. That's for the next video though. You can also take the shortcut without a mushroom on 200cc using the glider, and I like that. It's a fun course. It shines on 200cc, but for everything else, I can only give it a B+. It doesn't do anything outwardly offensive, and it's a decent enough challenge. I don't like Electrodrome at all. This is one of those courses where, for some reason, I struggle so much to even pull ahead in first place. And no, I'm not rating it lower because I don't perform as well on it. I have a feeling that there's something about its design that makes everyone closer together. That's just conjecture since I can't prove anything. There's a split road that suffers from the bottlenecking issue that Sweet Sweet Canyon does. At any moment, you can just be pelted by some random item and there's no way to see it coming. The pack also gets extremely congested at this part, so the chance of getting hit by someone's dragged item is much higher than usual. For being in a club setting, it really isn't that visually interesting. This is one of the most dull looking courses in the entire game. It's a chore to drive on, the visuals are oddly desaturated for what it's supposed to be, and it just isn't fun to play, look at, or spend any considerable amount of time with. To top it all off, there is a mushroom shortcut at the very last turn, and I'm just asking for some lemon to go with the salt that's already on my open wound. What an annoying turd this track is. It's a D tier. Actually, screw it. It's a D-. This course is dangerously close to being full-on terrible, and after such a good track too. Someone, please, save me from this techno nightmare. Oh my god. It's beautiful. Okay. So, there's a reason why I generally focus on bad courses in this game and not good ones. If I made a top 24 bad courses on this, then it would be shorter than if I made a top 24 favorite courses, because I would never shut up about them. And this is one of those tracks. So take this as a warning that I'm just going to go full on gush mode on this one, and I'll even give you a timestamp. And from now on, I'll install a visual indicator when I'm going to go crazy about a course's design. Mount Wario. What can I say about Mount Wario? Metric fuckton is what? It starts out with a jump out of a giant helicopter onto the summit of a mountain. You drive downwards onto some dangerously icy roads and into a cave with flowing water. This cave leads out onto a dam which you ride the wall on sideways. Then you leap off of the structure and into a small forest, with split paths, boosters, trees, fallen trees that you can trick off of, and I don't recommend doing it. After the forest section, you start going down a slope with slalom gates, mounds of snow that you can do tricks off of. It's twisty and turny, and it's a lot of fun because it's all opened up and not congested. Then you enter a tunnel sort of thing that leads into a very steep slope. From the slope, you can see it. The finish line, the goal, your destination. You barrel down this thing, hitting every booster pad that you can at breakneck speed, and then you glide off of it towards the base of the slope, where there is an audience waiting for racers to finish. Once you pass the finish line for the first time, you're still processing the monster of a course that you just went through. Mount Wario isn't just a Mario Kart course, it's a whole adventure, a journey, it's a work of art. And ironically, despite that it's an entirely downhill track, Mount Wario has peaks and valleys in its journey, which ends in a climactic finale. That moment where you can realize that you can physically see the goal at the last stretch is an unforgettable feeling. This course provides a rush like none other. It's unmatched in its composition. I also respect the section after the forest by resembling an actual sport. It pays an homage to real-life slalom ski racing. Of course, I have to mention the music. As big of a music fan I am, I usually don't ever let good music blind my opinion about a video game. For example, Sonic Heroes is one of the worst video games I've ever played. Even though the soundtrack is incredible, Mount Wario's music just elevates this already amazing track. The music ascends it to a whole different level because those peaks and valleys I mentioned earlier, Mount Wario's soundtrack highlights those moments. It's not just a song that loops. No, that wouldn't do it justice. It's dynamic. It changes depending on which section of the course you're in, and the music changes accurately reflect each section as well. It's perfection. I'll never forget the first time I saw this course. That initial jump out of the helo at the start, right onto the snow. The visual of it was mind-blowing, and this was all the way back on the Wii U. 200cc, of course, only makes this masterpiece a much more fun course. Oh, right, the course design. Well, what else can I say? There's not a single dull moment. If I had to pick one, I'll say the ice cave can be a little awkward to navigate with how it interacts with the glider. There's a weird turn to it. It's hard to explain unless you played it before. Even then, the cave gives the player a lot of options on how to drive through it. There's also the minor shortcut at the very last stretch, but honestly, it doesn't do a whole lot. It's a minor blemish on this otherwise perfect course. I've seen people complain about how hard the forest part is, but it really is simpler than you think. If you find the middle pathway, it's relatively clear and easy to navigate. The forest section itself offers the player some choice. There's a left and a right path. The right one has boost paths, and there's even a split path within the split. And if that's not enough, there's a mushroom path to the glider section right down the middle. This one little part has so many options. Okay. I'll wrap it up. In short, there's too much to like about Mount Wario. It stands out on a league of its own, not just for Mario Kart 8, but for the entire series. I expected to see it returning in a future title. If it isn't obvious, Mount Wario gets an overall score of triple S, a perfect grade. It also gets a badass seal of approval. This cup has a lot of good, but it lands just shy of being an A-tier cup. If Electrodrome was, better, it would have gotten it. Cloudtop Cruise takes place on the clouds, on the airships, and through a storm. It's a fun little romp. The level design is decent enough, driving on clouds is novel, and the ships are pretty cool. And wouldn't you know it, there are actually no shortcuts whatsoever that require a mushroom. A much needed and welcome change to the supposed formula. The storm cloud section at first may seem a little sketch to navigate, but when you realize the lightning strikes are all on a global timer, eventually you can just feel it out. There's not much else to say except, did you know the paratroopers have collision? Is that interesting? I mean, most people wouldn't know that. I'll mention that there could have been one more set of items in the stormy part, but otherwise it plays well. It's just a good course all around. Plus, I like it a fair amount, so it gets an A. Oh, this is a touchy subject, isn't it? Bone-Dry Dunes exists. Okay, this course is not that bad. Listen, yes, it's a desert stage. Yes, the color scheme is a bit limited, but being a desert course, it could have been a lot worse. So much worse. Yes, it is hard to race on, but it's also the Special Cup. By now the tracks should be getting a little bit more difficult than they have been. Maybe Cloud Top is too easy, but it's only common sense. It's too bad this course doesn't have any truly remarkable set pieces on it. The ship with the toads throwing coins is neat, and there's this big skull cave, but other than that, it's just desert. The glider section leads into the cave, which has 2 levels, but I'm gonna be completely honest, it feels like it's a bit broken. I've never had enough height to make it to the top road, literally never, and I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing wrong. That's kind of the issue with the whole thing if I had to guess. The readability isn't clear enough. I know this turn in particular, people have a lot of trouble with it, but look at how I handle it. Once you've figured out how to actually race on here, it isn't that bad. If some parts of the road were stretched out a bit longer, not to make it easier, just more manageable, then it would be fine. At least I hope people would say it's fine. Of course, there's the damn shortcut at the very end, and this one isn't pretty. It can be the difference between life and death for a racer. You can lead the entire race only to have your well-earned victory be taken away by some asshole who had a mushroom. It's the kind of thing that makes you question why you even play the game. I'm grading it a B-. It's probably a higher grading than you would give it. There's some nasty sections, some intentional, some not so much. I can definitely see why it's so polarizing. What the fuck? Who hurt you? Remember when I said courses should be getting harder? Fuck, I take it back because Jesus Christ. Whoever made Bowser's Castle for this game, seriously, who hurt you? Ugh. This course is a nightmare from beginning to end. First and foremost, the biggest problem with the course is the hazards. Yeah, virtually every stage in the game has hazards, but this is taking it way too far. This is leaving Mario Kart and teetering into Kaizo Kart territory. First, you have the spinning fire wheels, topped off with the swinging ball and chain, and the camera here isn't the greatest. Your next obstacle is a giant Bowser statue which punches either track. Being honest, it's pretty piss easy to avoid. The glider section after also has lava pillars that shoot up, which again is pretty trivial to dodge. I wouldn't consider it a threat, but then at the very end of the lap, there's a boulder that comes down and rolls towards your direction. This thing is bad enough where I don't feel comfortable even going on the other route. It's a hard thing to know when it's coming, and it's very difficult to dodge. It's also not worth the risk to go for a slightly faster path when you're in first, only to lose it at the very end. I'm not done though. Once you're at lap 2, the statues start to begin to shoot laser beams, as if there aren't enough hazards, and this isn't even considering the other player items all over the place. I'm disappointed, actually. Shouldn't there be more hazards? What about fire snakes from Grumble Volcano? How about meteors falling from the sky? Oh, and have the floor fall out from under you too while you're racing. Add some electricity hazards, some lightning you need to dodge, easy stuff. What about some other enemies? Throw them some fireballs that leave fire trails too that all hurt you as well. Oh, and make sure they just explode for no fucking reason. And at the end, just add a giant fucking flaming unavoidable whale that randomly eats the player. You think that's enough? You think that's enough fucking shit? There are more hazards here than there are rats in New York City. Simply put, Bowser's Castle isn't fun at all. It's a really large difficulty spike compared to everything else before. It doesn't allow for a whole range of kart combos, and 200cc, you best be bringing your most comfortable 200cc setup or else pray to the item wheel that you'll make it. When comparing to other Bowser's Castles in the series, this one to me seems like a retelling of Double Dash's take on it. The giant Bowser statue and the lava pillars at the start, except Double Dash's had a much better execution, as in, it didn't want to murder you at every opportunity. It also doesn't bring much to the lineage of Bowser's Castle's courses. Where is the cool wavy room from Wii? Or how about the weird cylindrical part from DS? Or even take a page out of Mario Kart 7's book and have a glider lead into a different path. It's not visually interesting either. It doesn't feel much like a castle and more like a castle-themed set piece. It comes off as very uninspired. There's nothing that helps this level's case, and frankly, I almost never have a good time playing it. I can't in good conscience grade it anything higher than an E. It isn't a total failure, mind you, but it's by far the worst Bowser's Castle in the entire series. Heck, one of the worst Mario Kart courses ever made, let alone Mario Kart 8. The last course is, as tradition, Rainbow Road, specifically Mario Kart 8's Nitro Rainbow Road. This one was made specifically to represent the Wii U's generation, and it's a little underwhelming. Now, I'll be the first to admit, when I first started, I wasn't the best at the game, and I kinda hated it. I was no good at what it was asking of me as a player, but now, I can say that it's okay. I think making Rainbow Road a man-made satellite rather than a magical course made up in the sky was kind of a mistake. It doesn't have the whimsical feel of the other games. Hell, even Mario Kart Super Circuit version had an air of mysticality to it. Maybe it's the Paper Mario Castle in the background? I don't know. As stated before, the Special Cup should have more difficult courses in it, barring the psychopathic slasher that was Bowser's Castle. While I find the difficulty appropriate for most cases, it's restrictive on kart combos that you can use. There are some you have no chance of winning on 200cc. The first couple turns are some of the worst in the entire game. You need to come to a near complete stop to not fall off. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can tell from the gameplay footage. There's some neat shortcuts, some are unintentional I think, and frankly, they're my preferred way of crossing the road. There's no mushroom shortcut present at the finish line, so it gets a point for that too. It's an okay track, if a little short for a Rainbow Road, but if it weren't for the lackluster visual, it would be an A- tier, maybe. I'm giving it a B though. At the bare minimum, it does its job. Special Cup earns itself a C+ grade. It does its job somewhat well as the final cup for the base game Nitro courses, but Bowser's Castle is such an outlier that it honestly brings down the grade by a lot. If it were something better, it would have been a fine finale for the newest tracks. Next up, some familiar ground with the Retro Cups from Mario Kart 8. Let's see how well they were remade. The first Retro Cup has a strong start with Moo Moo Meadows, taken from the Nintendo Wii, only this time it's set at sunrise instead of the afternoon. It's a simplistic course, the theme isn't anything too wacky, and it doesn't ask a whole lot out of the player. However, the secret of its simplicity is how effective of a course it is, as it's one of the most well-executed courses in the entire game. There's no crazy turns, major shortcuts, or hazards that will drive you to insanity. It's well reserved, there's not even that many item blocks, which in 8 Deluxe specifically, items being dialed back a little bit is welcome from time to time. Most of the booster shortcuts are at the very start rather than the end, which means that there's not as big of a chance for a win to be stolen. The hazards present are a non-issue, mostly, as it should be. They can trip you up if you're not careful, but they aren't an issue for most people. They're well balanced. It's all around a great course. It's not intended to impress anybody or be a benchmark of top karting skill or anything. It's just a farm rally track. It's a lot of fun to race on, and I wouldn't change a single thing about it. S tier. Next up is Mario Circuit from GBA. This previously unremarkable course from Super Circuit has had a facelift. It's like a mini version of Mario Kart Stadium from the Mushroom Cup. It's very simplistic. Not much more going on, but there's just something about this course that does not like me. For once, I can't exactly pinpoint what it is, but something about the level design leads me to getting hit, and often. It's not even a hard track, but items seem to just fly my way and hit me, or someone hits me with a dragging item, or I'm slipping on the fucking oil slicks. There's not even moving hazards, and for some reason I'm always fighting for my life. It feels much more hostile than most other tracks. The theme isn't anything special. It is taken from the first cup of a previous game after all, so I wouldn't expect anything crazy. It's just your typical Mario Circuit for the most part, except for the little ultra handy Easter egg, that's cool. Listen, this course does not like me and I don't like it much, but to be objective, I suppose it doesn't do anything offensive other than getting me covered in oil. I think the extra path at the end is neat, the shortcut, not so much. I'm grading it a C-. Cheep Cheep Beach is a stage that I thought was new to Mario Kart 8. As badly made of a game as Mario Kart DS is, the course doesn't reflect it whatsoever. I like it a lot. The only offensive thing it does is that the last stretch is very congested and that there's a shortcut. Sometimes it can be a bit much. My favorite part of the course is the underwater road. You can choose to stay on land or dive underneath for more items. The underwater path is a bit riskier, it yields more rewards, but it's not as speedy. You have to go out of your way for either items or pure speed. Another instance of the player having to make decisions, and I'm always here for it. I'm grateful for the actual Cheep Cheeps not having damage collision. You can hit them, they just don't spin you out. It's a really solid and well-made course. It's earned an A-tier grade. Hey, ever heard the term skill issue? I think this perfectly demonstrates that. We wrap up this pretty decent cup off with one of my favorite tracks in the game, Toad's Turnpike. Listen, I never played Mario Kart 64, so I can't relate to any past trauma that one might have with that version of the track, but I'm certain that Mario Kart 8's take on it has elevated to a much, much better version of itself. I will address the fact that, yes, the course is almost laughably simple if we're talking pure level design, but it's not dull or boring. Being a simplistic course does not make it bad. In fact, adding more complexity than it needs often can make a course much worse than intended if done improperly. That alone would justify why it's so simple, but I'm gonna go even further. The roads of Toad's Turnpike are made wide on purpose. The reasoning for this is not just for the moving traffic. I mentioned earlier how green shells can bounce off of dynamic objects. It's no different here. The road is widened to almost a comical amount to prevent any player and item congestion. Speaking of the traffic, this is something I feel should be implemented in this game whenever possible. I mentioned it briefly before while covering Toad Harbor, but here, the cars alone almost improve the entire game. The cars can block red shells. You can use them to bounce off green shells, and you can lay down traps if you're good at hiding items from other players, like bananas in certain lanes or dropping bombs. Stuff like that makes this one of the most fun and one of the best tracks in the whole game. It also keeps you on your toes. The road itself isn't your only option. You can also ride on walls, use the glider, drive on top of cars and ramp off of certain trucks, and fly over the overpass. There's a lot going on with what different players might do. It might be a simple track fundamentally, but it's a very dynamic and complex one for what's possible. This, in my opinion, is one of the best examples of what a chaotic track should be, an unpredictable one. No race is ever guaranteed on Toad's Turnpike. It's an S tier. Everyone hates on it for no real good reason. It still stands out as a well-designed track, and it helps that it's inherently memorable, being one of the most infamous tracks from Mario Kart 64. The Shell Cup is very interesting as the first retro cup in the game. It has some of my favorite picks. There's only one course I don't like much. I don't know, it feels like there's more something wrong with me than anything wrong with the design, or I'm just extremely unlucky on it for some reason. For all it's worth, Shell Cup gets an A. Alright, I'm gonna be blunt. The Banana Cup starts off with one of the worst courses in the entire game, that being Dry Desert from Double Dash. Listen, it wasn't a good course back then, and it's somehow even worse in 8. Any little character the original had is now gone, and it makes it all the more emptier. The tornadoes from the original were removed, as well as the Sandpit monster. The Sandpit is also way less effective in this game than in Double Dash, making it not even a real threat. The only true addition they made is an oasis as part of the last section of the course, which works for the theme, I guess, but it doesn't do much or add to anything. Visually, it's a sore on the eyes. There is nothing stimulating out here. They took the desert assignment way too seriously, as it's one of the most uninteresting stages in the series. You know how to make desert courses, guys. Why not bring over Desert Hills or Dry Ruins? At least Ruins had an interior section. Instead, you took a mediocre course from the GameCube and made it even less interesting. This is embarrassing, and the actual course design has virtually no complexity. You're more likely to screw up out of boredom more than anything else. The removed elements drain the course of any personality, and there isn't a real challenge, except for the other racers. It makes it not fun to play on. This is one of those tracks where the other players are the main issue. It's very easy to troll other people due to how open and flat it is. There is a whole lot of free space to use mushrooms and just shortcut across any part of the track as you please, while people who are actually good at the game and try to stay in the top 3, like myself, get nothing to counter it. It's also more helpful to sandbag for items, but that's a dirty tactic, and we don't do those kind of things. Not in my house, not in my lobby. Overall, it's uneventful, unfun, and really badly designed. And I know that you've heard 1,000 times before about the removed elements from Double Dash, but I never hear any good rebuttal for it. There's no good reason to take that stuff out. Overall, it's uneventful. When it gets picked, I'm just waiting for the finish line. It's an F+ tier. The only reason it gets a plus is because, good or bad, at least there's thought behind the design. Now I need to move on. The sand is getting in my shoes. Next up is... oh boy. Now, this track, I'm gonna be a bit of a contrarian, but I actually like Donut Plains 3 a lot. I'll point to the example that is a simple track to play, it's pretty easy, and there isn't anything too insanely technical about it at first glance. There's not even an anti-gravity section. You may think this track is pretty bland and easy to be 6 cups in, about a quarter of the way through the base game's retro cups, and even being a crappy SNES course from the crappy SNES game that nobody should like, you wouldn't think it would make for a great track at all. But the tech is there. There's a fair amount of choices to make while racing on it. When you go into the water segment and skip some grass like a true gamer, you don't even need a mushroom to do it. However, by doing this, you sacrifice getting items. Donut Plains has a few moments like these, and I think it makes for a more dynamic course. Player agency, that's the name of the game. Speaking of items, there's a lot less here than usual. There are only 2 rows of them in the whole track, but it kinda makes sense. It's really small. On 200cc, the races are over in less than 3 minutes, especially if you know the more technical shortcuts. Thematically, there isn't anything interesting going on. It's just Donut Plains. So it's really faithful to Super Mario World in that sense. Yeah, that's right, I'll bash Mario World 2, the overrated thing. I'm not a fucking psychopath, so I'm not giving it an S tier, but it doesn't really break any huge offenses for me, so I'll give it an A- tier. Now let's move on before the pitchforks start coming. Okay, why aren't the pitchforks going away? Listen, I get this is a beloved Mario Kart 64 track, I think, but god, this course does not like me. One of the turns not long in, I swear, is incredibly hard to make. I don't know what it is, but it feels so much tighter than most of the game's courses, and I'm only talking about 150. This bridge section is too straight, narrow, flat, and it enables people to snipe far too easily. Bombs are practically unavoidable, and you need to have your thumb glued to the rear view button. But my brain isn't wired for that, so I just get hit anyway without a chance to react. The part everyone knows is that they removed the ability to go to the castle. I know it doesn't add anything to the course, but again, it removes just enough character to make this seem like just another track. I don't approve of doing that. The last part where you can shortcut across the grass, it's fine, but it's a little too open for my liking. Anyone with mushrooms pretty much doesn't even have to worry about getting hit all the way out here, especially considering the finish line doesn't even have a barrier. Ugh, I'm just not a fan. The course doesn't like me and I don't like it back. C- tier. Finally, we reach DK Jungle, and I love this track. Now, there isn't anything too crazy or especially challenging about it, I'm just a big fan of it. Now, just to get it out of the way, I really like the Donkey Kong Country Returns series, the ones after the 2 classic SNES games. I consider DKC2 a near flawless platformer, and I think that Returns and Tropical Freeze are worthy to bear the title of Donkey Kong Country. It's kind of a shame they never made a 3rd DKC game on the SNES though. As for the course itself, it's nice to race on. There isn't anything too wacky like I said, just some simple obstacles. Some of the tree routes can be problematic though, I'll be honest and say that they could have extended the temple segment at the end, and the glider segment really doesn't have much going for it. Trying to cut over to the pit results in going out of bounds for some reason, so you have to stick to a strict path. No player agency means that I have to knock it down a grade. Otherwise, it feels like a good Double Dash track to me. The aesthetic is simple, but it's just Donkey Kong enough to be different from your regular jungle fare. This is a solid A-tier track. I want to rank the Banana Cup higher, but man, having Dry Desert really hurts your score. As good as DK Jungle is, and as much as I unironically enjoyed Donut Plains 3, I have to give it a C+ tier grade. If other tracks from the game were swapped around, it would have a more modest score. I'm certain my score is a higher grading than most people's though. Leaf Cup starts off with another course from Mario Kart DS. The good news is Wario Stadium is really damn good. It's even better in Mario Kart 8. 1, because it's been improved, and 2, anytime you're not playing Mario Kart DS is a good time. It's not as grand as Wario Coliseum, but it works for what it is. The corners are tight enough that you can have a real race. It's a bit more difficult to navigate, but it's not terrible. There's a small shortcut at the end, but the finish line stretch is somewhat bottlenecked. I do wish the last part was extended a little bit, but it's not offensive enough to ruin the whole track. It's a remix of a DS course that was a remake of a kind of bland Mario Kart 64 track. Probably not the best of beginnings, but I like the end result of it. There isn't much more to say. The Wario and Waluigi Stadium tracks were never much for experimentation, even if that doesn't stop Mario Kart 64 runners. It's just a solid track overall. A. Sherbert Land confuses me. A lot of the tracks in this game make it unclear which route is actually faster over another. Even things that seem like shortcuts are just barely faster than the regular route. But this one is among the most confusing. To start with, you have two routes. One that goes underwater and one that stays above ground. My instant instinct tells me that the underwater one is obviously slower, but the route ends with booster pads before converging, and just shortly after there's a regular road path and a glider shortcut. In my experience, the glider seems to be the same speed or even a little slower than just driving normally, and yes, I use a mushroom for the shortcut. I'm not stupid. There's another underwater route in this area too, but I know that staying above is the fastest way. Now somebody may argue that this is a GameCube era track and it may be a little bit strange compared to these modern courses. And my response is, that's a load of hoo-ha. These routes that I just explained never existed in the original Double Dash version. These were all added to Mario Kart 8, which tells me that this facelift for Sherbert Land wasn't clearly well thought out. Maybe these routes were thrown in to account for the 12 racer count and the potential congestion, but they also feel very haphazardly added on. If I were to offer a suggestion, you could tighten up the design of these alternate routes. But for the first lap, you couldn't access them. It's only after lap 2 and onwards that the ice breaks and you could go through the new routes. It would make the course feel fresher compared to the old and crusty GameCube version, but that's not what we got. Oh, and restore the freezies, freezing the actual racers too. For the rest of the track, it's fine. There's enough space for items. There's nothing particularly too demanding this course asks out of a racer. It's perfectly functional, but not exceptional. You might say I'm strange, but I do enjoy the winter theme. Maybe you consider it basic, but I think it's very charming. I give it a B-. There's a few things I might even say take away from the original version, but it's just very mediocre, only slightly above average. Music Park, or Melody Motorway. It's an interesting one. It's got an original theme to it based around music instruments. Things even sync up with the soundtrack. I personally feel that they could have done a lot more with the course design. It's just one path, save for the stupid goddamn shortcut at the end. The 3 twisty, drifty piano keys part of the track I feel lacks a bit. Sure, it's cool that it's dynamic to the material, but I think that there could be more to it. I think a double-decker sort of split with piano keys or xylophone keys would improve it. One track above and one track below. The entire course has a weird vibe to it, as the entire thing is just kind of floating there in some space. It's not really strange for a Mario game, but it looks particularly odd when other tracks have a physical backdrop of some kind. I don't think being abstract is bad per se, but I'm not sure if the floating dolly-like design is entirely intentional. I figured the empty space is more of a product of laziness. The look of the course itself reminds me of the artwork for the futuristic sounds of Sun Ra. I'm not a big fan of the piranha plant hazards. In most courses, they don't add anything to them except unnecessary damage in combination with potential items, but the big music notes, they're okay. They're one of the things that react to the music, so they're easy to dodge if you pay attention and listen. If you really don't want to deal with any of it, then just use the glider. 200cc makes playability somewhat of a pain. I think most players would think using the ramps would be beneficial, but they're not, unless you have insanely good control. That's the case for a lot of the tracks in this game, but it really stands out here. The theme is very cool conceptually, but it should be more consistent with the other courses. It's called Music Park in the US. So where's the city background? B+. Yoshi Valley returns from the ashes of the N64. The track is interesting as a concept, but the execution only really worked well in a local environment. In a competitive or online setting, people are always going to go the most optimal path, and yeah, that leads to congestion. But as somebody who's played this game for the amount of time I have, I can assure you that no one else goes for these other paths. Ever. There's only one hazard, a giant egg that spins around in one spot towards the end, but it usually doesn't pose a threat. It can work for destroying red shells though, which is always welcome. The track ends with the worst shortcut in the whole cup in my opinion. This course was fine and you had to put this in here. Whatever, it's not like I had any sentimental attachment to this track anyways. One quirk that I like is that the blue shell can get confused because of the track's design, and it has to lap the entire thing before it can go and hit first place, meaning it's possible to be in first, have a blue shell thrown, and complete the race before it hits you if all the conditions are met on the last lap. Just one of those things that's only on one track specifically, and I enjoy those. I'll give it a B+. Leaf Cup is fine. It's perfectly fine. The standout track is Wario Stadium, and the rest don't really do much that stands out positively or negatively. The cup overall, I give it an average B. It's a good thing the Special Cup pulls its own weight with this Nitro tracks. I feel like the Lightning Cup was mishandled in a few spots, and ultimately these issues do bring it down. Tick-Tock Clock isn't one of these issues. I always found it interesting how they adapted one of my favorite Mario 64 stages into a racetrack. I like to see more stuff like this. I admit, it doesn't do a whole lot special. It's a very wide track, and the trick off the gears at the end is actually slower than driving, just a fun fact. But this is one of the few times where the theme elevates the track itself. Instead of being something boring, using the inside of a clock as a stage basis is a pretty cool idea. All the moving clock parts are part of the stage instead of just being thrown in for aesthetic purposes. It's a page out of Castlevania's book for sure, but it works with all the moving different parts and such. I don't have a lot left to say. It would be an average course, but it's something I don't mind picking when I see it. It gets an A+. Oh my god, it smells like shit in here!
Man, what a bad track. To start with, moving item blocks is a bad enough idea, but then you introduce course hazards mixed with the moving items that makes a shitty idea into diabolical diarrhea. The overall design is also poor. It feels hashed together with no real thought or extensive playtesting done. Corners are far too sharp, top paths are really short, they're not very useful, tricks will launch you into walls and into pits. Trying to maneuver this incomprehensible shithole is hell. And the glider section can just not work if it doesn't feel like it, so it can fuck off to hell. All of it! With all of that, what good does this track have to offer? Nothing! There's no redeeming qualities with Piranha Plant Slide, so congratulations! I'll give credit where I can. The theme is something I like. The Mario Underground is a great idea on paper. The sewers. It's been a thing since before Super Mario Bros. How Mario Kart 7 executed it was not the way to do it. There's too many hazards, too many moving parts, and the design is brutal, and I'd even go as far to say that it's unfair. And that's when it isn't being jank, broken garbage. Don't even get me started on 200cc. The 1/3 of the track that I can say is decently enjoyable is the wide open sewer area. It's way too short-lived, it's a big curve, but it's the one part of the course that feels like a real Mario Kart track and not some beta stage death trap. Too bad its entrance is a choke point that makes it virtually impossible to dodge items. I'm really trying to find something to like here. Can we move on? It's not the worst track in the game, somehow, but it's literally the shittiest one. Take your E+ and get the fuck out of here.
Grumble Volcano is a course you might not like, but it's one that you must respect. The floor is lava and the track is crumbling all around you. There's a few bad choke points in the first half of it, but other than that, it's not half bad. It's wide enough, and the lack of any real walls is a bonus for items not ricocheting off of everything, so it's mostly a skill track. I'm a fan of the crumbling level too. It's one of those where you shouldn't be so inattentive, because once you're caught slipping, you'll go into a lava bath. The hazards are just right, and just dangerous enough to be somewhat of a threat. I'd even argue it's one of the most fair tracks in the game, if only it weren't for those choke points I mentioned. The only other thing I dislike is the little gaps between platforms. Now, I played enough hours where I've been shocked right over a tiny lava pit more than a few times. Now that is unfair, but it's not nearly as bad as the course from before. I'd rather burn alive than drown in Goomba Dookie. Respect the volcano, and you should be fine. Solid track. A-. Rainbow Road 64 is the last track of the base game's retro stretch. How does it do? Okay. I've always really liked Rainbow Road from Mario Kart 64, but it is really boring. It's a long stretch of nothing for a pretty lengthy period of time. It takes nearly 6 minutes to finish it normally, but it has charm to it. The fireworks, the music, the chain chomps? Mario Kart 8's version of this course really heightens the charm. It's one of the most visually pleasing tracks in the entire game. The city below, the train that shoots coins, the fireworks are back. There's a lot here to like. I think I'll give it an S tier. Easy. Oh, wait, no. No, that's not right. This version of Rainbow Road 64 has been neutered, to say the least. I know there's this new thing where people swear that the original game didn't have railings, but that's what made it so difficult in the first place. But then, why are the railings missing in 8? If you fall off the first turn, you may as well quit because you are never catching up. The chain chomps don't chase you. They're a static hazard. Their purpose now is to just bounce and make the track go all wavy. I mean, okay, I guess. Way to remove any real danger from the track. I suppose that's why the rails are absent. But worst of all, this track is only 1 lap. 1. Technically, it's 3 laps, but you only loop the entire thing once. and this decision is extremely baffling to me. I get 64's original version is quite long, it's one of the longest courses in the entire series, but you also shortened its length in Mario Kart 8, and you made it just one lap on top of that? Let's not even forget the fact that 200cc exists. I know the track was made before 200cc came out, so fair enough. I would propose to make it 3 full laps for 200 and 150cc classes. I understand that it would be too long for 150, but who even plays those anyway? Like I said before, if you fall behind even a little bit, you have no real chance of catching up. I'm not a low-life sandbagger, but it doesn't give you enough opportunity to catch up to the front. For once, there aren't enough item boxes to allow for any real comebacks. There's no alternate paths and no real shortcuts. Instead of altering the 64 design, making it 3 full course laps would have fixed these issues. This track had so much potential, and I hate that such a charming course that could be one of the best in the entire game is just a C+ tier. It legitimately makes me sad to mark it as such, but it's the unfortunate reality the stage exists in. The final cup for the retro tracks is underwhelming, to say the least, but they really aren't supposed to overcome the nitro sets. It's just in their nature. With that said, the nitro set isn't anything special either, especially with how bad Bowser's Castle is. Piranha Plant Slide just barely edges out Bowser's Castle, but both of those tracks are horrible. Lightning gets a C grade, just below the nitro set, so can we do better? Yoshi's Circuit is one of the classic courses from Double Dash that's far above average. This is one of those that'll test your skill in terms of taking good lines and not eating shit on the sharp turns. If you want a real test, try it on 200cc. Not only is it extremely challenging, there's some alternate tricks that you can do only in this mode. You can see it in the footage at one point. You have to be inventive if you want to survive the twisting turns. Trying to get a clean lap here will prove to be difficult, but it is possible. You just have to think outside the box. Alright, I'll address the elephant in the room, the shortcut. It's more of an alternate route than a true shortcut, but regardless, it was removed from the Double Dash version. I'm not a fan of that myself. People argue it didn't really add that much of an advantage, but what it does remove is character from the course. There's no path diversion or anything, everyone goes nearly the same way. For everything else though, overall, there aren't any real glaring flaws. It's a fun, challenging, and competitive course. It gets an S grade, easily. The good times don't last for long. It doesn't matter how good any course is when you have something that's this bad in the same cup, and directly after too. This is top grade dogshit design. Bad track in basically every sense. Excitebike Arena stinks. It really stinks. My name for it is Excitebike because it's shite. First of all, let's talk about the design, or lack thereof. What is this? It's just a long stretch with the turn. I hope I don't have to explain to you why this design is objectively bad. The absolute worst kind of track for an arcade-type racer. There's no imagination. It's dull, mind-numbing, boring, insert another synonym here. And to make things worse, it negatively impacts how the races go. The long stretches allow random items to hit you easily. Who thought this was a good idea? Was it Fred Fucks? Green shells are the worst because there's no alarm indicator for them at all. But then there's also fire flowers, boomerangs, stars, bullets, and the blue shell. All of these give you little to no time to react to them. And you might think, oh, well just zigzag. You should actually try to avoid them. And my response to that is, are you not seeing this shit? There isn't really anywhere to go. You can't snake because the road isn't wide enough. But the off-road makes it very wide. The actual boundary is way into the off-road. But of course, shit like green shells and fireballs bounce off of them. Zigzagging to avoid items slows you down, you can only really drift in one direction, and ricocheting items are a real problem. Everything is a problem. I'm not ignoring that the layout is random with every race, the same stage chunks as the NES game, but it barely helps the stage's case for being so badly and lazily designed. In some cases, it makes things worse. How? Well, how about being in the air lets red shells hit you no matter what? It doesn't matter if you have 1 item protection, or 3, or 10, because that red shell will track you from underneath and hit your cart on the bottom, and yes, it's a guaranteed hit. Your only out is if you have active invincibility items. Imagine a course being so badly made that it introduces new problems with item behavior, and it's detrimental to players. And really? Excitebike? Of all the black box NES games, you picked Excitebike? I understand that it's a racing game, but you really couldn't think of anything better to use? How about Slalom or fucking Mach Rider? The theme is just average, which doesn't help anything whatsoever. It's a boring, poorly designed track with an average stadium theme. It's about as visually appealing and interesting as the Washington Redskins stadium. And no, I'm not gonna call them the fucking Commanders. I really don't have anything good to say about it. It's about as inexcusably bad for a course as you can get. It's an F- tier, the lowest grade a course can be. Dragon Driftway is a breath of fresh air from that putrid pile of garbage that we were just on. But let's be honest, nearly any other track would be. Thankfully, Dragon Driftway is a pretty damn good track. I'm going to be echoing the positives I said about Yoshi's Circuit. It's challenging, competitive, and just fun. It's twisty and turny. You need to be alert to stay in the game. Huh. Kind of the exact opposite of what was between this, yeah? The theme itself is worth mentioning, and it gets its own award for it. It's based on a boss fight from Mario Galaxy 2 with themes of Chinese legend thrown in there, like Journey to the West. And do I even have to mention the Kung Fu diorama for Lakitu on display? It's just cool, and the fact that you're racing on a dragon statue's backside really feels like they took a page from Dragon Ball Z. One big complaint that brings this one just below Yoshi's Circuit, the last turn shortcut. I don't know why you keep doing this to me. This course would have been an S tier if it wasn't. It'll have to settle with an A+. Mute City. Man, this cup is just plagued with bad tracks, isn't it? Funny enough, I wouldn't want to mute the game because the music is one of the few things that's good about it. It does make me wish I was deaf and blind though. It starts with a single path raceway full of booster pads. It's noticeably walled off too. I say noticeably because you'll quickly notice the total fucking maelstrom of items bouncing around. And to make things worse, it gets even narrower, which causes a funneling issue. It's stuff like this that makes me wonder if this game was even play tested for online. Nintendo went for the Titan colon design for this one. Afterwards, it briefly opens up, and here we have the Turn of Death. This part right here is one of the worst turns in the entire game. If you don't over-prepare for it, you'll go flying off the edge. It's one of the few moments where the player may use the brake button, even on just 150cc, let alone 200. You may as well come to a complete stop. It's a short distance to the finish line from here, and it's not good. Last-second shortcuts at the very end make for an overall frustrating course. It just isn't well made in general. From start to finish, there's a variety of flaws. The only praise I can give, I guess, is the chance of throwing items back up on the part of the track above you. Bananas will actually stick to it. It isn't a visually interesting track either. The palette is pretty, well, muted, I guess. It's almost like it's been desaturated. There's no vibrancy, not that every track needs to be super vibrant, but when everything else is so lacking, I can't help but wish for something positive. And what's with all the hazy smog? Is this Mute City or goddamn Shanghai? Can somebody tell me why it's so difficult? Mute City is supposed to be an easy track in the actual F-Zero games. It's practically the Captain Falcon version of Mario Circuit. And here, it's been made one of the hardest tracks in the game. It's not even a good kind of hard. I just want to go home. This sucks. I really hate this more than you could ever know. Egg Cup has some really amazing courses, but the whole quality is bogged down by these two gigantic tumors. I really wish I could rearrange the layout to something better. You could have been one of the best cups in the game. Two of these tracks are some of the most interesting ones competitively speaking, but the game blew it. You blew it. You blew it worse than the Dallas motherfucking Cowboys. It's a D-. Wario's Gold Mine starts the Triforce Cup strong. It's a nitro track from Mario Kart Wii that's usually a recipe for something good. Windy, twisty, and energetic. This version of the Gold Mine is actually vastly superior from the original Wii version. I know there's a debate about the hazards in retro tracks being watered down in both 8 and 8 Deluxe. I had to evaluate those changes myself, but there isn't anything lost by making it easier to stay on the track down the ramps. Alongside the minecarts no longer hurting you. It's not any better or worse than the Wii version, it's just different, and I happen to prefer this version. The bats being able to collide with the player though, that's just unnecessary, it's dumb. There's a shortcut towards the end of the track, but honestly, it's never been a big help for me. I'm not sure if there's a real advantage at all, and it's placed a bit further back from the finish line. There isn't a lot negative I can say about it, and if there is, it's not enough of a detriment for me to point out. It's a solid track through and through. Oh boy, this next track. SNES Rainbow Road is a complete joy to race on. I would argue that this is what a track based on pure skill looks like. No borders, no unpredictable hazards, you just race for first the best you can. It's funny how one of the worst courses from one of the worst Mario Kart games ends up being one of the best when ported over. If I'd only heard that this was happening without playing it, I'd say it was a terrible idea, and I would be completely wrong. The mushroom shortcut isn't right before the finish line, it's just before the last turn, and there's some other high skill shortcuts one could pull off. You can also dodge thwomps entirely by racing on the very tightrope edge of the track. There's one thing I can point out. There are some long stretches of the road where you can easily score hits on other players, which is something I've expressed that I dislike. But with the lack of any walls whatsoever, the ricochet problem is non-existent, and there's more of a reason to zigzag unlike Excitebike Arena. You might argue that it's made too easy without walls. I'd say yes, it's easier in that regard, but it's difficult in other areas in ways that other courses aren't. And this track on 200cc is just absolutely lovely. It only gets better the higher the CC you race it on. It's absolutely one of the best tracks in the entire game. There's only one grade that fits, triple S tier. For many people, Ice Ice Outpost is just an average or even below average track. And if you agree, you can go suck Frosted Snowman's icicle testicles. I don't really see much that it does that's offensive. Because it's ice? Maybe? I really can't be sure what people are expecting an Ice Outpost themed track to do creatively other than being an Ice Outpost. The theme here is on point for what it tries to accomplish, and it's one of the most unique ice themes, not just in Mario Kart, but in Mario games in general. The track takes an interesting design, where it's very wide but split into two tracks. The difference between this and Sweet Sweet Canyon is that the execution isn't complete garbage. At most times, you can switch which lane you want to drive on. Does it go on for a straight path for a while at times? Sure, and it does have walls, but the fact that it's not a complete straight line makes the item hazards a bit more manageable. Once again, unlike Excitebike, which is a steaming pile of rhinoceros dookie. Later on, the split path goes upwards, entering an anti-gravity section, and once again, way better than Sweet Sweet Canyon's version. The whole second half of this course is so much fun when you can cleanly flow through it. The only thing that it's missing is an underwater section. I think that would make things really great. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's not as offensive as everybody else makes it out to be. It's a really, really high A tier. An A+, as a matter of fact. Now, what's this cup called again? Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, I'm not playing Link for this video. I picked the better green character. We started with a good course, to one of the best in the game, to on a pretty damn great course, and we end with this.
Well, you got Legend of Zelda, where you walk around with a little bitch, his little bitch ass sword, a little shield, and he just goes, ha, ha, ha. Come on.
I don't like Hyrule Circuit at all. The Zelda theme doesn't do anything for me because I don't like Zelda games. The only Zelda game I beat was Tears of the Kingdom, and granted, I did spend about 145 hours on it, but my point still stands. It's not well made, and its poor design hurts its playability too. The first half is whatever, but everything after the castle part is... What happened? The turns are super sharp, the path is so narrow it will catch you off guard at times, especially on 200cc. I'm not understanding what this is supposed to be. It's like they got this layout from a completely different game. Not even a rally driver could prepare for this shit.
Medium left, medium left, medium left! Listen to my calls!
The split path just afterwards just makes things that much worse. The part of the track that raises everything makes everything more narrow than it needs to be, so you'll likely hit the wall or drive in the grass trying to avoid the wall. The course goes from 0 to 100 real quickly in the second half, and it can't have been done on purpose. I haven't even mentioned how many problems the items bring to this area as well. Not a fun track. I don't recommend choosing it, and it's honestly not a great representation of Zelda games. It also brought in Link as a playable character, and every Link player in this game is a right twat, so that makes it even worse. Hyrule Circuit gets the Brought In a Character I Hate award. I would rather take a dump in a ball pit. E grade. I really like this cup, but wow, Hyrule Circuit will impact the grade. It could have been an S tier, but it falls just short. I have to grade it an A just because of how good SNES Rainbow Road is. It really pulls its own weight. And I've been noticing a trend that these DLC cups for the original Wii U version have had some truly excellent tracks and some truly terrible ones. Some of the worst I've seen from this game yet. I sure hope the next cup doesn't have any more bad courses. So let's see what the next cup has to offer. We start with big...
No, yeah.
Baby Park, you are far too important for me to talk about right away. I'm gonna put you on the back burner and I will get back to you. What the fuck? Are you kidding me? This cup is a fucking disaster! Who thought this was a... So... Cheeseland. One of the worst fucking courses in the entire game. Let me walk you through the terrible design of this horrible excuse of a racetrack. First off, the visuals. They couldn't be any more boring. Yes, the road is supposed to be cheese, but it just looks like a generic desert track. If it wasn't named as such, you'd never guess it was supposed to be anything other than sand. Compare it to the original GBA version, which has something going for it. For one, it actually looked like cheese, and two, the background had a space theme. It looked like an alien planet, or in other words, the moon. It's not the most clever concept in the world, but it works well enough to make for a unique track for Super Circuit. Would it have killed someone to make the skybox look a bit more like outer space? Oh, look at that! Somebody did it better than you, Nintendo! It doesn't end there either. The mice? Gone. Now the only hazards are some random ass chain chomps. There's not even background mice. What happened? Did they run out of time? Where did the creativity go? All of what you needed was there in the GBA game. Don't even try to tell me that they couldn't be bothered to make a brand new model for them when they're literally brand new models for Huff and Puffins and Yoshi's Island. They're even from the same goddamn game. The only credit I'll give it is that they gave the actual course geometry a real facelift. This is one of the most unrecognizable tracks from the original. If it had additional visual elements from the GBA, that would be awesome, but that's not what we got. With all that said, that's just the surface because this track has some deep-rooted fucking issues. Yes, it's a very windy, twisty track. There's sharp corners all around, and that's fine, but explain how these holes in the ground are supposed to help? I've completely stopped using them because all they do is launch me into the wall, and I'm not even talking about 200cc. This is 150 where I'm complaining about it. The biggest and most fucked up sin is the unneeded shortcuts. They added one at the beginning of the track, which is fine, but the one towards the end of the track is one of the worst shortcuts in the game. In fact, that's this track's award, Worst Shortcut. On the second half of the track, there's a ramp that you can boost towards, and from then on, you basically secured first. You essentially skip the entire second half of the whole racetrack. The problem with a shortcut like this is that it rewards bad players. It basically says, if you can't catch up to the front of the pack, then that's okay, because here's a path straight to first place. That's not how racing video games work. It removes competition from a race. I know I've gone on and on about shortcuts at the last stretch this entire video, but these really do make the game less enjoyable. It's like death by 1,000 cuts, and this course's shortcut is like being sliced in half. I used the word unneeded earlier, and they really are unnecessary because neither of these shortcuts were even in the original GBA version. I've avoided mentioning most examples of shortcuts being added specifically to Mario Kart 8, but this one really warrants discussion. We have a track that's not only worse than the original version by a far margin, it's also less visually interesting, has removed elements, and is generally a bad track to play by itself. In short, it's not fun. It's not good. And the music! Good fucking lord, I generally don't consider the music when grading courses, and it's still not a factor, but this is one of the most irritating songs in the game. It's worse than the GBA version. How is that effing possible? It's not even a bad song, but the arrangement in this game specifically makes me want to drink liquid earwax. I would go as far as to say that I listen to and enjoy some music on a regular basis that if somebody told me that it was annoying, I could understand. I mean, listen to these. I know enough to know that all music is subjective, so it's quite an accomplishment if there's a song I actually hate. But this version of Cheeseland is one I would dare say sounds bad. There may be some PTSD associated with it too. That and the other course, we'll get to it. It's a shithole. I can't name one redeeming aspect about it. It's truly awful in every sense. F. Well, it's Wild Woods. It's okay. It's a breath of fresh air from the other two, and it's easily the best designed track in the Crossing Cup. Visually speaking, I like it a lot. There's a ton going on that you'd likely miss as a racer. The fact that you'd already set the track on a 90-degree angle says all that it needs to. The giant tree is the centerpiece of the whole thing, and the Shy Guy Village that appears later on is super unique. It's good enough to be its own Mario stage theme in a 2D platformer, or something like a lost concept from Legend of Mana. The whole thing reminds me of an Ori game as well. As for the course itself, it's very mechanically similar to Shy Guy Falls. The turns in the section where you hit the boosters are all here, but I will give the edge to Shy Guy Falls though. That's nothing against it, but I find that one to be more fun than this one. It's a decent track though, well worth a pick online. B+. By the way, this course's music is in 5/4 time, so it gets the Aaron Funky medal. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. Last but not least, the course that gives the cup its namesake, the Animal Crossing course called Animal Crossing. Loving the creativity of the name, guys. It's a little rough for actually racing on it. Lots of little tight sections and turns that can catch you off guard. And good stinking luck doing this on 200cc for the first time. I'm not a fan of the shortcut on this either. There's a lot of little changes depending on the season that gets chosen. You can choose which season to load based on holding a bumper or trigger when selecting it in single player. It's based on the position of them in the thumbnail, but it's completely random for online. The changes aren't big enough for me to go into detail, but they're noticeable. The seasons do add a little bit more visual flair to the track as a whole. If it were just one, it'd be quite boring and unremarkable. One thing that deserves a mention are the villagers at the start. They're randomly selected, but I do appreciate them being there. That alone earns this course a unique accolade for most amount of sexy characters in a single Mario Kart track. Oh, did I just say that out loud? Otherwise, it's inoffensive. I seem to get completely fucked on the last turn pretty consistently. Sweet last turn shortcut at the end, and I don't want to hear anyone bitching about Mount Wario's tree section when the tree part of this course is infinitely worse. It's fine overall. It's a B. Well, that's almost all the courses covered here. Not a good selection in all honesty, but yeah, there is one thing I left out. It's that time. You know who liked Baby Park? Hitler. I need you to sit down over there and listen to me for a moment. I won't hold you long, but I need to read something straight out of the ICRC to you. Oh, and if you're not familiar with that name, it's the Red Cross, those who established the Geneva Conventions. Now, I've written down all the points that I believe are relevant to what I'm about to say for Baby Park. Now, I'm not going to say all of this out loud. You can pause the video and read it right here. But I've come to the conclusion that this course does indeed violate the Geneva Convention in some way. I mean, is it humiliating to play on Baby Park? Well, yeah, I pretty much think so because most of the people who play Mario Kart 8 are not babies, shockingly enough. I mean, who wouldn't look stupid racing on a track designed for infants? That's a couple steps away from just wearing a diaper outright in public. So yeah, to boil it down, I do think that this track is a cruel and unusual punishment for a person to play. It's humiliating, and you're being held hostage against your will whenever you have to play it online. So congratulations, Nintendo. By definition of the ICRC, your shitty course is considered torture on multiple accounts and a violation of the Geneva Convention, and it's a violation of human rights on several counts. This game is a freaking war crime! If the worst thugs in the entire world had access to Baby Park, I'm not sure that they would favor picking it, unless they're, well... You know, on second thought, if you do know someone who actually does like this course, maybe a bit too much, you should probably check if that person is on a list or something. The demographic for this course should not appeal to adults. You can argue this worked in Double Dash because that game, for the most part, only existed as a local environment. It was never designed for online play. Your options are to play the game solo, with someone that you know in real life, or host a LAN party with 7 other players. Double Dash also had the benefit of almost every course in that game being, at worst, good. I can't say the same for anything else, but it was a unique and fun game, and there's no reason to actually take it super seriously. The issues that start with Mario Kart 8 begins with the fact that not only does this game have online, it also has the same VR system from Mario Kart Wii, and while it's not the first Mario Kart to feature 12 players, it's the first one to feature 12 players on Baby Park. This is bad. When you have points that are dependent on your placement and negated if you place low enough, Baby Park absolutely has no place existing in even a slightly competitive environment where placement actually matters. It's an RNG track through and through. No amount of skill will ever guarantee you a win on Baby Park. The game is already RNG enough, but this takes it to a whole other level that no other course does. It's not just a bad idea, it's an unworkable bad idea. No smart game developer would ever do this. If that isn't bad enough, I'll bring attention to the fact that it's even narrower than it was on GameCube, which means, guess what? More item rebound. This is not design. This is garbage. There's no place to go to avoid items, there's no time to react to anything, and if you fall back, good fucking luck trying to get back to the front. You may as well kiss first place goodbye. You may as well just bend over and get raped in the ass by a giant horny moose in the goddamn woods. At least that would be more fun. It's not just a bad course. No, if it were, I wouldn't have put this much time into it. This is a bad decision that affects the entire game as a whole when it comes to online play. This tells me that, no, Nintendo didn't consider what this course would be like in online, nor was it playtested properly. And I see you motherfuckers picking this shit who play like absolute dog shit at the game. I know you only pick it because it's the only one you have a chance at winning at. You're the problem! And on top of that, there's also the trolls who pick it because they think they're funny. Let me tell you something. You're not cool, you're not quirky, you're not fucking funny, and you should be banned from playing the game because you're an asshole. It's been 10 years of doing this shit, and at this point, it's an overplayed joke. Stop! Stop doing that! This piece of shit being in the game is like if you were staying over with friends and it was time to order dinner, but in this bizarro world, you can only choose between a few options in a vote. Option A is Taco Bell. Not bad. Someone argued that it is a good option because of its variety, but the quality, to each their own. Option B is Popeyes. Someone preferred this one because it has higher quality, or that it's chicken, or both. Either way, it doesn't matter because option C is a dumpster, like a literal fucking dumpster filled with half-eaten food in a sea of filth, shit, mysterious fluid, maggots, flies, bugs, whatever you'd find in a dumpster, it's in there. Why would dumpster be an option in the first place? Even first, why the fuck did Carl vote for option C? Is he stupid? Is it because the first letter in his goddamn name is C? Get the fuck out of our house, Carl. Fuck you. And as for Fred, he picks the random option, which is leftovers. Who knows what the fuck that would be? Kick him out too. Baby Park gets a very special award of, big shocker, worst track in the game. It's astonishing that it was even considered to be brought in. And now for the theme, unfortunately I can't give it an F. There's no full sweep F here, but the idea of a course being themed around an amusement park is honestly a pretty good one. It's worthy of an A. There was more effort put into it than the actual play area. If only the racetrack got the same amount of effort. You already know the score. F-. It's the lowest rated track on here because it doesn't get any worse than this. Thanks for ruining the game, you asshole. Like I said, 2 of the worst tracks in the entire game are in this cup, which means this cup is a D tier. Yeah, Wild Woods and Animal Crossing are decent enough, but Baby Park alone would ruin any cup no matter what. I've said what I needed to. Let's move on. Neo Bowser City returns, starting off the Bell Cup. I'm gonna be honest, I never played Mario Kart 7 either. I'm just not a handheld guy, you see. But Piranha Plant Slide is not indicative of the course quality. While it's a fairly challenging course, it isn't overly difficult, and on 200cc is when it really becomes something fun in a way that most other courses aren't. It's pretty damn balanced at being competitive, and it's perfect for being a late game track. I don't have much to say that's worth bringing up that's negative. The only thing I would point out is the shortcut on the last turn. It should be a little further back. The theming is really good. It's one of the only courses that has rain in it. I wouldn't go so far as to call it cyberpunk, but a bright city at night with rain never fails to look cool, even if the game is crap. By the way, this is my reminder to tell everyone that Mutahar from Some Ordinary Gamers owes me money. Like, he genuinely owes me money. That motherfucker owes me money. It's just a course that doesn't get old. Mario Kart 8 itself gets old before Neo Bowser City does. S tier. Ribbon Road is yet another completely revamped GBA course that is barely recognizable as the same thing, other than the layout. The first part is a pretty difficult section already, with no walls leaving you in the off-road if you drive recklessly. You're rewarded if you know how to maneuver it with the boost. The second part offers no such luxury. Now the course has no off-road or rails. If you fall, you'll suffer a Lakitu penalty. The course does offer some risk and reward here though with some shortcuts. I'll talk about those in a little bit. I have some nostalgia for an old PC game called Hot Wheels Stunt Track Driver. I was already familiar with racing games at that age, but I'd never seen one where you're scaled down until then. Suddenly, the ordinary rooms of a house become massive spaces. A backyard becomes a field. Ever since then, I really like that kind of thing. And no, it's not because I'm a furry either. Ribbon Road is quite similar to the feel of Stunt Track Driver, somehow without as much flair as a 1997 PC game, as it's pretty straightforward. Despite having anti-gravity, you don't go up the walls or make insane jumps or loops or anything, but it is also based on a GBA track's layout, so I can't fault that too much. The theme though, top notch. Back to the course itself, the shortcuts. First of all, the shortcut right before the finish line is crap. Total crap. It's one of those that actually brings down the entire thing. No skill required, reward for being bad, etc. The other shortcuts I mentioned before, I don't know if it's just me, but even as good as I am, I can't risk taking them. They're much harder than the rest of the game's shortcuts in my opinion. I really do like this course, I just wish it were a lot better. There's real potential here. B. Super Bell Subway. Now, this one is really fun. Racing through a subway train tunnel is a pretty cool concept on its own, but the execution is far and away what anyone may think. The tunnel itself has many sprawling paths that one can take. There's a lot of verticality, not to mention the subway train hazards that spices up the race. You're required to stay alert, and it's a track that's never boring. The track itself doesn't demand a lot of the player. It's pretty wide with the path being narrowed by the trains, which means the course is somewhat dynamic. The player, no matter who they are, needs to adapt on the fly. The trains also provide some welcome indirect protection against red shells. The theme reminds me of my time in Grand Theft Auto 4, riding through the subway tunnels, running over the occasional homeless person. That's not why I like Super Bell Subway, I just thought I'd mention that. I do wish it was a bit more New York or Bronx based, but it does get the idea across well enough. I also want to point out that the first couple of notes in the music is eerily similar to Ocean Palace. Listen to it. The only real negative I want to point out is, you guessed it, the shortcut on the last turn. Seriously, I don't know what they were thinking. Did you know that before the Booster Pass, 49% of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's courses had last stretch shortcuts? It's a pretty large increase from the previous game, Mario Kart Wii. Ugh, this is so frustrating. It would have been such a perfect stage if it wasn't for that tumor. Whatever, it's still an S tier. It's fun, exhilarating, and it remains one of the most unique courses for the entire game. All of that counts for something. Finally, we end on Big Blue, another course based on F-Zero. Unlike its counterpart, this course is actually good. Damn good. It begins with some turns that aren't too bad. The alternating conveyor part is an interesting feature, but I feel that they don't have much force or resistance for the player. You can take them or drift on the edge, which is what I prefer doing. Next, you glide down to a split path section. What's cool here is that if you're skilled, you can take a shortcut that I'm not sure is even intended by the developers, but the weird low gravity effect that the stage has makes it possible. Eventually, you'll reach some half pipes with water rushing down them. It's like a water park. In fact, I like it better than the actual water park course. Gotta give credit for allowing such a big shortcut. And after that, there's some more conveyors. This time they have boost panels. It's a neat exercise to keep track and link boosts together for the entire segment. It's a lot of fun. The last stretch could be better. Lots of opportunities to get hit right at the end, and there's an off-road that you can boost through. I'm not a fan of those two aspects, and I think it's fair to remove railings off the last part of a course, especially on a sectional track. Oh yeah, this one is sectional. I guess I have a soft spot for them. I don't want to be biased, but I feel like these types of courses are more well designed. And there's actually a third type we haven't gotten to yet, but we will very, very soon. Big Blue is one of my personal favorites. If it wasn't for the last part, it'd be a... You know what? Fuck it. It gets a triple S tier. Welcome to the club, Big Blue. Wow. A cup from the original DLC pack that didn't have total garbage courses in it. I'm pleasantly surprised. And we only had to wait for the second round of DLC to have a quality DLC cup. It earns its S grade. And that's the last of the courses from Mario Kart 8, but we have a lot more to go. Will the second half hold up to the first? Okay, I need to sit down for a moment. 48 courses is a lot and we're only halfway done. So this is the part where I sell myself out, right? I guess if you're still watching, you must think I'm entertaining. At least, I would hope so. No, this video isn't sponsored by anyone, but I would like to say that I have a lot more planned for this year and for the foreseeable future. If you're enjoying this video, then I could recommend you to subscribe, not that I can force you. If, for whatever reason, you want to financially support me, I do have an album up for sale on my Bandcamp. If you like what you're listening to right now, then there's more like it on there. It's also up on my channel for free listening. They're the full songs, and don't worry about ad block. I really don't mind. Besides that, I guess I should promote my pages outside of YouTube. I'll highlight that I have a Discord server. It'll be in the description, but you really have to be over 18 to join. I mean it. I made a Blue Sky account too for whatever reason. There's nothing much on there. Who knows? Anything else I'll put in my description. And to play it safe, you should just be over 18 to interact with anything I do outside of YouTube. And I guess that's it. I hope you're liking the video so far. I guess I'll get back to it. Starting now, we are entering the content that's exclusive to 8 Deluxe. After the horribly, painfully long drought of anything related to Mario Kart, Nintendo in fact did not announce a new Mario Kart game, but rather an extension to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, featuring basically a sequel's worth of content. The only reason it isn't a sequel is because these are mostly retro tracks, with just a few nitro tracks here and there. And from here on for these cups, I will be putting an addendum to each one where I talk about things that I would have personally changed to make it better. And, you know, these are all just my opinion, of course. I also want to make it known that I'm really well versed in Mario Kart 8's original courses in addition to the DLC ones. I have hundreds of hours on these. However, the Booster Pass tracks are ones that I have the least experience with. On top of that, I didn't play Mario Kart Wii in its heyday, so those are new to me. I didn't play Mario Kart 7 because fuck the 3DS, and I didn't touch Mario Kart DS. I'll never touch that game. I would rather shove my entire arm in a toilet full of Pyramid Head's diarrhea. I did play the GBA one for a little bit, but it was so long ago that I remember basically nothing about it. And Mario Kart Tour, the less said about that game, the better. With these courses being relatively new experiences for me, some of my arguments and opinions may hold less water than usual. The funny thing is, I was always in support of adding Mario Kart Tour's track to Mario Kart 8, and Nintendo made my wish come true. So, how do these hold up? It's time to find out. And we continue with the Golden Shroom Cup. The first course is... Wait, I have to talk about something first. Why is this referred to as the Golden Dash Cup? This is actually the first time I'm finding out that they're called dash mushrooms and not just, you know, Mushrooms? This thing is apparently called the Golden Dash Mushroom, which is kind of long-winded, but why is the word dash prioritized over mushroom? It's a bloody mushroom! That's gold! I'm not calling it the Golden Dash Cup. I'm not calling the other cup the Spiny Cup either. Leave me alone. Paris Promenade is first up for the Booster Pass DLC, and it's a milestone for a lot of things actually. First for the Deluxe DLC, first tour course in the game, first course based on a real-life city, and the first course to use the third lap system. That's right, we get to talk about what I call variable laps. Mario Kart Tour's courses are circuits in the original game, but there's different routes to make different circuits. Obviously this would be a challenge to implement into a game such as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, or you have many copies of the same track that are just slightly different. That obviously wouldn't fly. Their solution for this was to have every lap take you down one of the different routes of the courses, and this doesn't apply for these tour courses either. Oh no, some retro tracks have been retrofitted for this sort of design as well. You'll be making left turns where it was a right turn before, upwards, downwards, forwards, and backwards, and all around the whole track until it's been fully rinsed. At least, I assume. I haven't played Tour. Of the 3 lap types, this is easily my favorite kind. Yes, the circuits are a staple of racing in general, and yes, the sectionals are plenty good as well, but these variable type courses take me back to a super underrated racing game I actually joked about earlier called Split Second. In that game, you were able to trigger traps on your opponents based on your power play meter. If you built up enough of it in the red, you could trigger a big destruction event that reshapes the course entirely, taking you through entirely alternative routes. It's a really fun and unique racing game, one of the best arcade-style racing games of all time, and the studio was shut down by Disney. Thanks, Disney. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, France, the city where a cup of coffee costs about 3/4 of the Booster Pass. It's fine, but it has a weird geometry problem at the beginning. You'll be bumping into the weirdly shaped walls and stuff. The start line is also way too close to the arch thing, and it makes the first turn unnecessarily difficult in my opinion. And yes, I know, it's a monument, I just don't know what it's called right now. The rest of the course though, it's well made throughout. Where it really stands out is on 200cc. It's one of the most satisfying races to pull off cleanly. What a great first impression. I knew putting these on a real Mario Kart game was a good idea. Plus, they're just a breath of fresh air after playing the Wii U tracks for like 10 years. One weird thing I want to point out is how this path doesn't require a boost. Yeah, you'd think it's off-road, but it actually isn't. The only downside to taking this path is that there's no item box, but that's up to the player to make that choice. It's a milestone setter. With all that said, it's an A- grade. Bon travail! Passe une mauvaise première impression. I hope to God I got that right. And with that mouthful out of the way, we move on to 3DS Toad Circuit. And I don't know why everyone seems to have a problem with this course. If you ask somebody about this track in Mario Kart 8 specifically, you'll get the response that it's boring or it's nothing special, waste of a track, it looks bad. So many nitpicks about it. The thing about that is it's literally the first track in Mario Kart 7. I don't understand why everybody needs this to be some bombastic spectacle. I don't mind a simpler track every now and then, and I welcome it far more than something like GBA Mario Circuit. Even then, it's not like it's totally static either. On lap 2, there's a glider panel that gets activated and you can fly over the overpass at the start where you can see the other racers. I have a real soft spot for that sort of thing. At least there's more going on here than this game's Mushroom Cup courses. I don't want to be biased because of the Toad representation, but I will defend this point until the very end, damn it. With that said, it does fall short considering the other tracks that are in this cup. It's a circuit-based lap system, no anti-gravity, not that it needs it, and it doesn't really need to make a big name for itself. It's like Luigi's Circuit from Wii. It's not the most impressive, but it's a necessary track. Choco Mountain has some interesting faceless from the original version. The valley has been removed and the cave has been extended and ends with the glider segment of all things. The rocks are here too, but they're not really a huge threat. I will have to give an edge to the original N64 version. I enjoyed the dangerous cliffside road towards the end, and that feeling has been reduced a lot in this version. It feels sort of watered down. The visuals are a clear upgrade though. I mean, it's a fucking Nintendo 64 track, what do you expect? This is always one of the most unappealing courses from the 64 on a visual standpoint, so I welcome the improvement. There's not much else to say. It's a little palate cleanser that the cup needed. It's a 64 track, it's kinda short, and it can be really difficult to catch up if you fall behind. Coconut Mall puts me in an interesting spot. I mentioned before I didn't play Wii in its heyday, so I really don't have any nostalgia for it. That said, it's not bad. I like the mall theme, but it doesn't really have the charm from the Wii version, with the user Mii's no longer being present. The course design itself doesn't do anything truly egregious, which is to be expected from a Mario Kart Wii Nitro course, and that's fine. Or is it? I had a hard time determining which of the two paths near the end is better, top or bottom, but it's not as unclear as something like Sherbert Land. There's seriously some kind of issue with performing tricks. Namely the part where you fly out of the mall. Sometimes the motherfucker refuses a trick even though I know I did it right. Even worse, because of Mario Kart 8's screwed up physics, you might barely touch something and go flying around like a spastic. What's that shit about? There's no shortage of weird geometry. The fountain area, the edges of the escalators, and the pillars towards the end. You have to be fairly alert in the mall. As for the outside of the mall, okay, now for the elephant in the room. I do complain about course hazards a lot, I admit, but only if they're excessive, and God forbid if it's anything like this game's Bowser's Castle. But why did you neuter the cars? They're so easy to dodge now. They're basically a non-threat. So this version of Coconut Mall is even less egregious than I previously stated. What the hell, Nintendo? The course has no balls now. Sin cojones. I'm actually gonna dock a point for that. I'm sorry, but you're not S tier after all. Not this time. So, what do we have here? A B- cup? Not a bad start for the first fresh tracks in a long time. I look forward to ranking the rest. Oh, hey, I'm not finished here. I mentioned that I'm adding addendums to these cups, and here they are. Hindsight is 2020, and now all the tracks are known and played by us. I think I can look back on the cups and analyze them more critically than when they were initially released. So I'll take this time and state what could have been done more differently to make these cups much better overall. Of course, this is only my opinion, but I do think that even these small changes would have made the booster pass much better. And from here on, I'll be replacing tracks in these cups to make for a hypothetical better experience. Not that I have any power, it's just for fun. For the Golden Mushroom, it's real clear to me that this is the basic cup to kick off the new DLC. Every track is taken from early cups in their respective games, except I'm not sure on Paris. I don't even know if Tour has cups to begin with. I don't have a problem with these set of tracks, but if I absolutely had to replace one of the courses... I know, I spent all that time defending it, but I honestly would replace Toad Circuit with Double Dash's Luigi Circuit. It fits the same criteria. It's the very first track in Mario Kart Double Dash, and Luigi Circuits usually aren't anything special, and it wouldn't have to be. Its only purpose is to exist as a starter track. But the one from Double Dash specifically is unique in the fact that its lanes merge. You'd have enemy racers coming at you from the opposite direction, no matter if you're ahead or behind. This makes racing unpredictable as hell, but not in a bad way that Baby Park is. God, where do you exist? I also think it would have made everyone happy instead of giving people another reason to hate on Toad. But in a way, I'm sort of glad it's here. I think it's pretty funny that Toad Circuit upsets people so much, so you bet I'll be picking it online just to make people mad, but also because I don't think it's terrible. One last thing, I'm also not allowing myself to replace any Tour tracks. I don't know jack shit about Tour, so I'm not qualified to judge a set of courses that are unfamiliar to me. I did mention the variable lap system being my favorite style for the courses in this game, but that doesn't automatically mean the course will be good. Tokyo Blur fails to satisfy me. I'm not sure how you took Tokyo, which is not only the closest tour city to Nintendo's headquarters, geographically speaking, it's also generally one of the coolest cities in the real world. So how did this track turn out so undercooked? It's one of the shortest tracks in the entire game. In fact, I had to record 2 separate races on it just so I have enough footage to cover my voice clips for it. It feels very empty, and it hardly looks like Tokyo, or anywhere in Japan at all. The only hazards are thwomps, which are pretty easy to avoid. The road is very large and has a lot of straightaways, and it fails to be an interesting track to race on or to look at. I'm running out of time here. There's no last second shortcut, but it doesn't really matter when it's this uninteresting. Not a fan. D-. 次回はもっと良くする必要がある。これは期待するだ。You know, I love these traffic courses, and Shroom Ridge from DS is no exception. This is definitely the hardest and most challenging one. It has the tightest turns and riskiest sections out of all of them without a doubt. And on 200cc, prepare the brake button because you will not survive without it. My only issue is that some setups are fairly unusable. It's that difficult. There's also a visibility problem. Sometimes you simply can't see obstacles on the road. You have to anticipate them. I wouldn't have made this a negative, but there's other traffic courses in the game that have little to no visibility issues. Now, I don't know why they felt the need to add a shortcut. It's a little too close for my liking, but in all fairness, it definitely could have been worse. A lot worse. Yeah, there isn't much else I can add. It's a solid course. It feels like a proper Mario Kart track from the 2000s with an obvious graphical facelift. Some may argue against that, but you can't deny that it is a higher fidelity than the crusty-ass DS resolution. It's an A-. It would have been an A, but the visibility thing and the shortcuts are nitpicks worth mentioning. To take away from it for me. GBA Sky Garden. Well, it's another extremely short track. The road texture from the GBA has been changed to, in my opinion, a less interesting one. As much as it tries to be an interesting course, I just don't find it to be. It doesn't have any real spectacle to it. It's like a lesser version of Cloud Top Cruise. That's not anything against this course. Cloud Top is amazing. I was also pulling for this track being in the booster pass too. I figured it would be more interesting than this. But I don't know, it seems like the road was made way too big, and they added a shortcut at the end that seems like it's far too much trouble than what it's worth, and again, it's too close to the finish. It's not terribly offensive, but it certainly isn't a track I'm wanting to play all the time either. See, Ninja Hideaway is the first Nitro track of the booster pass, and it easily steals the show. It's pretty difficult, and the shortcuts they put in here are very risky. I think it could have used a little work for playability. It feels a little rough around the edges, especially on 200cc, and I don't understand why the top path is sometimes impossible based on a cycle of these moving traps. But wow, this course is just a blast. It's a visual treat for the eyes, and it can be a joy to play on as well. I especially like the hidden shortcuts throughout, like an actual Ninja Castle. It's especially good when the course's theme plays into the design too. As I mentioned before, the last section is a bit rough. It's easily the hardest part, and it can become very difficult to maintain staying on the top route and ahead of everyone else. There's also some kind of 200cc shortcut that lets you skip the last turn. I can't even pull it off because it's insanely difficult. There's also some trick jumps you can do, but I find that they do more harm than good, especially in the case of these fans where sometimes they just don't work. Does anyone else find a concerning amount of boosts and tricks that simply refuse to work consistently? Is it just me? If the last part was playtested and polished a bit more, this easily would have been a top tier track, a triple S even, but it will have to settle for A-. Not such a great showing after the last cup, and we're only on wave 1. I wouldn't mind grading the cup a B, but Tokyo Blur is just that bad. I have no choice but to grade it a C. Unfortunately, because of my own set rules, I can't replace a tour course with something from another game. Therefore, I would say the next best thing is replacing Sky Garden with N64 DK's Jungle Parkway. Tokyo Blur is still on the lower end, but at least it would only be that course. And besides, it's over quickly anyways. New York Minute is more like what I would expect from a real-world city being depicted in Mario Kart. It's vibrant, it's a really pretty course too. Too pretty, actually. Where's all the filth and trash? Broken beer bottles? And there's no homeless people to run up and stab you with steak bones. And this isn't the only track in the game to not have stabbings either. It's a fun course. Really fun. The player's rewarded if they have a good enough eye to spot shortcuts and take them. And there isn't one at the very last part of the course either. So it is possible. There's a surprising amount of varied routes a player can take, whether it's a side alley or on the same road even. It's a deceptively simple looking course, but there's a lot of options for you. I would like it if it was just a little longer, but that's really the only critique I can think of. Very solid. And no MetLife Stadium. Good, because that's in New Jersey, and everyone would eat shit there anyway. You ever seen that picture of Kansas, speaking of terrible NFL teams, being flatter than a pancake? This is that, but as a racetrack instead. Look, I understand that this is an SNES track, but that is no excuse because we've seen courses from the other flat games that have some of the biggest facelifts in the entire game. This looks like a fan game, and I don't mean that in a good way. I mean that in a someone made this in a real engine in a few hours way. I do get that it was brought back for a number of previous games, but damn, could you really not give it a little bit more flair? Now, let's talk about the actual design. It's pretty average. It doesn't do anything crazy in either direction. It sits perfectly in the middle. The lack of any real design diversity means that it's primed for you to get hit with many stray items if you don't zigzag all around. If you look at it, it's very symmetrical, but most importantly, it's rigid. It's to be expected when it's based from an SNES track. But hell, look at any of the other SNES or GBA tracks in this game. No matter how bad they are, at least they don't stick so close to the original design. It's not fun. If you want my suggestion, why not port Mario Circuit 2? That one isn't as poorly designed despite the ever-present straightaways, but Mario Kart 7's rendition of it replaces the jump with the glide section. It's practically perfect for Mario Kart 8, even without any anti-gravity sections. It's extremely faithful to the original design, and as a result, it's one of the most uninteresting tracks in the entire game, let alone the booster pass. It's a D. Kalimari Desert is one of the N64 classics. This is one of the tracks everyone thinks of when they hear Mario Kart 64. All of the elements are here, the train and everything. However, it's got a few surprises up its sleeve. It's actually a variable lap course, meaning that even regular circuit tracks can get this treatment, and they nailed it. Absolutely. On lap 2, the course is flipped on its head and you're taken through the train tunnel, something that every Mario Kart 64 player did as a kid just because it's there, and now it's a part of the actual map. Now, this is an example of how to do retro courses correctly. This is also one of the best looking desert courses in the entire game. While the others are definitely desert looking, they don't have much going for them. Kalimari Desert, however, manages to not be boring thanks to it being so western focused. It's a classic. It's fun to race on, it subverts expectations, and just downright fun overall. I kinda get that it has nostalgia bait written all over it, but I genuinely like this take on it. And plus, I don't have any nostalgia for Mario Kart 64. I didn't have the system back then. It's an easy S grade. Finishing off the Turnip Cup is Waluigi Pinball with its first ever console appearance. It's got a really good theme going for it. The idea of racing on a giant pinball table with Waluigi's giant balls and having to dodge them on an actual table is genius. It's also pretty vibrant. It looks like the course that Electrodrome wants to be. It's a very chaotic track with pretty challenging turns, but there isn't anything that's brutally difficult. It's probably at about the same level as Neo Bowser City in terms of track challenge. The main feature is the extremely, somewhat unpredictable pinball table itself, with balls flying around at super high speeds. It's one of the courses that demands uninterrupted attention from the player. This was a heavily requested track, and I was interested myself in playing it despite not having any experience. It's no surprise that a Mario Kart DS course provides yet another well-made track, and this time it has an interesting challenge to it. It earns an A+. An otherwise great cup is brought down to a C tier thanks to Mario Circuit 3. Now, you might think that my suggestion will be Mario Circuit 2, like I said before, but I would propose to replace Mario Circuit 3 with Shy Guy Bazaar. I've not played on it myself, but it doesn't look that offensive. At worst, it looks like it would be a B tier track. But I can't say for sure unless I actually play it. That alone would make this cup an A tier or even an S. Even Mario Circuit 2 would have made it an A. It's a shame. What can I say? Another real-world city course knocks it way out of the park again. For a continent that's entirely ass backwards and upside down, it's not half bad. I mean, at least Sydney isn't. Much like how New York is missing the homeless people that would run up and stab you, Sydney Sprint is missing the giant killer spiders and kangaroos. And come to think of it, there aren't any kangaroo characters in Mario games, are there? There is a lot going on here, but not in a bad way. It definitely exhibits some of the most unique course design in the entire game. You have laps that go backwards, and then it leads you through it again, driving the other way, and it's designed completely for both ways. There are a few courses in the Booster Pass that do this too, but none really do it quite as well as Sydney. The course playability is pretty good. You can sight read the track, there's no real big surprises or fuck yous thrown in, it's just straight fun. It being one of the longest tracks in the whole game also makes it pretty suspenseful for those big comebacks. It's very versatile, a strong contender for one of the examples that Mario Kart should follow for good course design. It's been a while, but we've got ourselves another triple S grade. Okay, we need to have a serious talk here about these fucking GBA and SNES courses. Sometimes they're really good. Sometimes they make me want to jump out of an airplane without a parachute while flying over the Bermuda Triangle. Like, what is happening here? Why are there courses this bad in the game? What's wrong with the course? How about what's fucking right with it? Moving item boxes are pretty bad to begin with, but combining this mechanic with ice physics is only something a catastrophically gigantic, hopeless moron would come up with, which makes it hard to believe that a group of developers actually worked on this and said it was fine. How about hazards? How about moving hazards? How about entirely too many course hazards on the fucking road? Penguins slide around unpredictably next to an open lake that is not an alternate path. It's a death plane. It's incredibly easy to hit a penguin or fall in a hole. Why is it this hard? It's not even hard in a good way. It's a virtually enemy spam. Now, I fully realize it's a result of it being a GBA track, but this is way too short. This track is almost as short as Germa. Germa reference in 2025. And it has a shortcut at the end? Oh, that's good. That's fun. How about you go fuck yourself with an ice cube? I hate Snowland. E-. Hey, this is not written in the script. This is Future Goose talking. When I wrote this, like I said, I don't play Mario Kart Wii. I never really played the game that much. I just got it a couple years ago, and I've never played it online. When I wrote this, I didn't know about the Mushroom Gap shortcut. I acknowledge that it's there. I kind of see that it's, you know, kind of earned if you can manage to get it, but this is also kind of a big oversight, but the fact that there's no Lakitu pickup over this pit is kind of telling that the developers knew about it, but that's enough about that. Let's get on to the actual script now. Mushroom Gorge is yet another course from the bundle of Wii courses. It's pretty good, and with the release of Wave 6, Funky Kong being a character makes this game that much closer to an authentic Mario Kart Wii experience. It's not a hard course by any means, but there are some really wacky shortcuts, not including the Mushroom Gap. For better or for worse, depending on who you ask, the Mushroom Cave section is closer to how it plays in the Wii version. It's not watered down in difficulty. If you drive wrong here, you fall, and it does take some adjusting on 200cc as well. It's your basic course, with some twists. It's not too difficult or offensive. The challenge is just right on both 150 and 200. Nothing here that's worthy of pointing out in terms of negatives, and best all, I like it a lot. A-. Now this is very fascinating to me. For some reason, Sky High Sundae is a very polarizing course. No pun intended. Either you think it's just okay, or you think it's the worst thing since mint-flavored ice cream. I think it's just fine, personally. In an objective sense, the course design is pretty bad. It is just an oval. Kinda like another shitty pair of ovals we know. But don't jump to conclusions just yet. Yes, it's an oval, but this course starts off with a glider section. You land on a road that extends upwards, and then you leap off these half-pipe things before swinging around and lapping. All of these layers, all the verticality contribute to the actual quality of the design. Because it's not just a straight path with the occasional turn, it makes for a hell of a lot more fun than its design would suggest. It's no walk in the park, you still have to pay attention just to raise, just like almost any other track in the game. It's a legitimate Mario Kart course. I think the theme is unique too. This course is like a much better Sweet Sweet Canyon. There's a lot of vibrant colors though. It looks like a Fall Guys map. Finally, there's no real shortcut at the last stretch. In fact, I don't think there's any shortcuts at all in this course. I would maybe put that against it because I don't think there's anything wrong with mid-track shortcuts as long as they're not just a cheat code like Cheeseland. The only real critique I have is the camera doesn't exactly show you the track below you at this point. I never really had a problem with it, but I can definitely see why people have problems with blind jumps. Not good for sight reading. Yeah, I'm not offended by this. I think it works perfectly fine. With that said, it doesn't really particularly stand out either as a course or even for the theme. I can confirm though, this place really is made of ice cream. My shoes and my socks are ruined now just by standing here. Thanks, Nintendo. Personally, I think it earns a B+. Really solid cup with really solid courses. And of course, it's ruined by one really shit course, so I have to give it an A-. Obviously, Snowland would have to go. But with what? Well, I'm thinking, since Sky High Sundae is already sort of a winter-themed course, just not in the snow department, some variety would be welcome. Sydney is the city course, and Mushroom Gorge is your grassland type course. In between those would be, I guess, a town theme? Oh, here we go. How about Delfino Square? Yeah, that course isn't so bad. The DS tracks have a record of being mediocre at worst, so it wouldn't hurt to throw it in there. Yeah, it's a little basic, but I'd easily take it over Snowland. Now, I need to go to the clothes store because I'm standing here barefoot and I feel uncomfortable being on camera like this, so excuse me. No. London Loop. I have some interesting things to say. It might seem contradictory at first. Of course, I will address the elephant and castle in the room. You see what I did there? You know, not funny. It's the fact that there aren't people that run up and stab you, so it's not an authentic London experience. I'm trying to be funny and I don't think it's working. This is a variable lap course like the other tour courses, but this one could almost pass as a circuit course. While that doesn't allow it to really stand out like the other courses in this style, it doesn't really matter much. It doesn't feel like the design was built for wildly different lap routes, and that's okay. It's a very solid track with some neat landmarks. Going through Leadenhall Market is neat. It splits off if you'd rather take the outer road. Then there's this part with one of the largest grass shortcuts I've seen in the game. You practically need 2 mushrooms to clear the full thing. My only real complaint is that it's a bit too easy going. There's some chain chomps, a nice homage to the Queen's pet dogs, but I believe that traffic on some of the roads would really spice up things. At times it can feel like there's large stretches of race where nothing is happening. Throw a double-decker bus here and a Reliant Robin there, those would do wonders for the design. And where is the tube system? One of the most defining parts of London, if not Britain itself, and it's just not here. We could have had another fun subway track. Super Bell subway haters are unfortunately rejoicing. Could have done a lot more using London, but otherwise it's pretty fun. At least it's not Tokyo Blur. I'll give it a B. I don't think I'm a fan of this one. Yet another GBA course, and what can I say about this one? It's super short, one of the shortest courses in the entire game. One of the shortcuts is virtually inhuman to actually take well, and it's full of walls and rebounding objects all around. It's super rough around the edges, and I mean that literally. Oh, did I mention all these complaints are 150? Yeah, good luck trying this out on 200. You will not be prepared unless you train extensively. I did mention that Twisted Mansion wasn't anything super interesting visually, but this is somehow even more bland than that. Yeah, it's from the GBA, but look at the other GBA courses. Massive facelift, blah blah blah. This shit needed a lot of reworking. Make the straightaways longer or something to extend the track. Give the player more room actually to, race. You need a particular setup just to comfortably race like I do in the footage. Otherwise, take it slow. You're gonna fall and run into walls and items, and good luck trying to recover if you fall behind. There isn't enough road, items, or time to do so. It's one of those that's super difficult to stay on course, but not in a well-designed challenge kind of way. More like a last part of Hyrule Circuit sort of way. In other words, bad. The only reason I won't rate it lower is because there is a good sense of flow, but like I said, you need the setup to pull it off, so I still say it's pretty bad design. Yeah, it gets a D. Before we continue with this next course, I kind of want you to pay attention to the cracked out Wario CPU in this footage, because this is nuts. If I finish up before then, I'll show it afterwards. Rock Rock Mountain, another classic from the 3DS. Oh god, did I really just call a 3DS course a classic? How old is Mario Kart 7? Oh dear god. This was one of the tracks I was really hoping would be brought back in HD, and it does not disappoint. The whole thing is a spectacle. You start on a cliffside, and I always like this kind of high-up atmosphere. You drive through a cave and glide downwards, you go through a forest and drive up a mountain. Literally up a mountain with rocks falling down on you. This is one of those that makes me think of certain amusement park rides or tours. It's such a cool thing to see. Of course, a fun theme and spectacle means nothing if the course is no fun to play. Fortunately, Rock Rock Mountain delivers on this too. The only really iffy part is the cave section before the gliders. The rocks are perfectly telegraphed, the shortcuts are spaced out nicely. There isn't a major negative I can say about it. Easy S. Maple Treeway comes back from the dead, from the Wii. Unlike other highly demanded courses from Wii, I can't lie and claim that it's back to its full glory from that system. The leaves do drop items, but not stars. I don't get it, this is the kind of thing that does nothing but make the game less fun. The net bridge at the end was also swapped out in favor for a glider segment. That's on Mario Kart 7. Personally, I like the bridge. It gave a little bit more life to the course. Otherwise, it plays how you'd expect an MK8 version of Maple Treeway to play. The wigglers are here and with the vengeance, and the half pipes are there if you need an emergency item. I really don't think they're there for speed. I could just be, stupid. It's a classic, it's from the Wii, and it handled the port better than Coconut Mall did. Give it an A. Man, an A- cup, once again brought down by Boo Lake. It's so close to being just a good cup full of good courses, but I guess that's too much to ask for. I've got an easy pick though, pretty much brainless. I've not yet been totally burned by a DS track, which is, wow, kind of crazy to say, but put Luigi's Mansion here. It's a lot longer, it's a lot more unique, and best of all, it wasn't designed by a fucking lunatic. We're off. And the first course here is Berlin Byways. It's got traffic, it's got variable laps, it's in Germany. I'm not even gonna dance around it. This is one of the best tour courses in the whole game. Now at first you might feel lost and confused. It may seem like a weird and rough track, but once you learn it, it's one of the most rewarding and fun courses to race. There is one part where you can go into the subway train, but trying to drive out of it is so awkward that it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where it would be an advantage. The whole thing is fun throughout. It promotes players to play as skillfully as their own ability will allow. There's a small part of the race where you do drive backwards towards the goal entering lap 3, but you do have to look out for it to notice. I was wondering if there was any room for potential for that both ways design to come up again, and if there was, I wouldn't have doubts that it'd be a top tier track. It already is now. There is one section near the end that can catch you off guard if you're not prepared, and that's these stairs. This won't affect the grade, but I do have to mention the music. You might have noticed that I'm actually using music from the game itself. It's just that good. I'd have to really sit down and give it a good listen, but this might be my favorite song in the entire game, and I generally don't think much of Mario Kart's music. It's not as slick and well designed as Sydney Sprint, but Berlin by far stands on its own 2 feet. It's a well made and super fun course on all playstyles, and this part here, is that the Berlin Wall? With thwomps in it? That's too clever. In fact, the theme category is getting a bump just for that alone. Overall, it gets a big fat S. What? I don't speak German. Peach Gardens is another entrant from Mario Kart DS, and like the rest, it's not half bad. I'm a little more familiar with this one since it was previously in Mario Kart Wii, but hang on, don't think you know what's in store because this is actually a variable lap track. Sort of. Yeah, the first 2 laps are your standard circuit style, but then on lap 3 you start driving in reverse, which is a super rare thing in this game. Now you have to be careful of oncoming traffic and shit. To me, that's pretty funny. As for the actual course, yeah, it's pretty fun. I don't know the specific changes from this versus Wii or DS. I mean, whenever you're not playing Mario Kart DS, that should be an automatic improvement. Some shortcuts here and there, and using the reverse driving makes this part sort of a last stretch shortcut. Those clever bastard developers. And by the way, on lap 3, you are legally required to high-five Luigi, or your game is repossessed away from you. Just thought I'd let you know. It's a B+. Merry Mountain is the kind of course that just exists. There's not much to say. It's another snow track but with the holiday theme. I'm guessing they expected that to carry the whole course alone. Other than the train returning from Rainbow Road 64, there isn't anything that really makes it stand out. There's a lot of courses in this game already, but this is a track that screams filler to me, especially when we have a far better Snow Mountain themed track already in the game. In the base game too. The second half of the race especially seems to be devoid of anything. Items, opportunities to catch up if you fall behind. It's almost a straightaway until you reach the big turn on the mountain, and going down the mountain, again, this is bare bones. It's devoid of anything interesting. There's a glider panel that gets activated on lap 2, but it doesn't add a whole lot. I don't know, it's kind of a nothing course. It doesn't do anything truly terrible, but it's the very definition of average. A little bit below, C-. Rainbow Road returns again. This time, it's the Mario Kart 7 version. I think that this would have made for a great pick, but for somewhere else. We'll get to that in due time. This version of Rainbow Road is easily the best iteration of the track, period. Believe it or not, this thing actually tops SNES Rainbow Road. They lean super hard into the outer space theme specifically this time. You're driving around planets, on planet rings, landing on big-ass moons that are somehow larger than planets, and you drive through tubes that look straight out of Marble Blast or some shit. It should be pretty obvious because you're watching, or should be watching, the video on the screen, but this is one of the prettiest and best looking tracks in the whole game. It really is one of the defining Rainbow Roads in the series. Most of them are pretty iconic, but this one is something real special. The gameplay works well with the theme too. Some of the paths are a little bit too straight for my liking, but it's not a total deal breaker. For every small fault this course may have, the sum of its best parts easily outshine the blemishes. I enjoy the difficulty of it. In no way is this course a snooze fest like some others. I got nothing else to say. There's virtually no room for negative criticism. You can probably already tell what grade I'm gonna give it. I do think it's funny it's a sectional lap track because Holy shit, I couldn't imagine doing 3 full circuit laps on this thing. Not that I would complain. Anyway, it's a triple S. There's no substitute. Well, finally we have a respectable cup. The first one in the booster pass to be graded in S, and it only took 6 tries to get it right. As for my suggestion of replacing courses, I know something that would bring the Moon Cup to new heights. Replace Merry Mountain with Airship Fortress. That way, you have a good course instead of an average one. You would have it on home consoles for the first time, and it fits perfectly being in the 3rd slot. This is like a special cup, your Bowser-style course before a Rainbow Road. It would be such a good fit here. The only sort of issue is that it would make this cup have 2 DS courses in it, and I don't know if that's a big enough problem to upset someone, but I really don't care. It's a better choice than Merry Mountain. So, how well does Amsterdam Drift hold up to the rest of the Tour City tracks that start off these cups? Honestly, it's getting to the point where the quality of them is making it difficult to consider their placement overall. Amsterdam Drift is really, really good. It's got all the signature qualities of other great tour courses. It's another variable lap track. This time, I will say it pulls off the feeling of driving through a city really well, which is the whole point of these tracks, but this one does it exceptionally well. You first fly off into the countryside before turning back into the city through a ferry. There's no traffic in this stage, but instead we have these trams, and then after that you go into the famous Amsterdam canals. This course takes you up, through, and under the city. You drive into oncoming racers on lap 3 as well, and there's this tulip field towards the end. That field really is the only part that feels a little awkward. There's no point where the course really feels too difficult, but there's a lack of substantial shortcuts. They're there, but they don't really seem to help all that much in my experience. I may say that it's a little too easy going at some points, but the trams and overall variety do make up for it. I'll make a point of just how amazing this course is, thematically speaking. It feels like a big adventure through the Netherlands capital. Even though the scale is way off, the pacing of the track's themes do make it feel like a much bigger adventure. It's just great, and Amsterdam by itself is a really nice looking place in reality. So that also helps its case. The only thing we're missing is that signature Amsterdam beer. If there was one course to do Beerio Kart on, it's this one. S. Oh wow, this is a rough one. After the shit we've been through, I've grown to expect pretty not great things from these flat-ass adaptations. But Riverside Park isn't the worst thing in the world. It's definitely one of the harder tracks in the game. The already narrow road is made even harder to navigate because of the Patuis walking around. It's also short as fuck. The Patuis do carry items, so this is a rare instance where you just see random mushrooms and bananas on the ground, which is a crazy sight to see in this game specifically. I would say you'd have to be either extremely lucky or extremely skilled at this game to make use of the mushroom drops on 200cc. I'll mention the facelift serves the course well. Something about how it looks does activate my nostalgia gland for the GBA. There's just something about the lighting palette and the way the road and grass looks. The jump through the waterfall is a fantastic way to end the lap as well. Overall, it's not half bad. Not half bad at all. B-. I don't like you, DK Summit. I don't like you at all. Yeah, this is another rare Mario Kart Wii dud, and it's easily the worst course in the cup. I mentioned that we already have a perfectly fine snowy mountain-themed course in the form of Mount Wario, so why are we here again, saying the same thing? I'll give credit to Merry Mountain. At least its theme warrants snow. It just isn't interesting to race on. DK Summit, on the other hand, just isn't fun, and it's not even new. The whole thing feels unpolished, like uncharacteristically unpolished, for as chrome clean as the rest of the entire game is, DK Summit has these very noticeable rough edges around every aspect. At some points, it feels like the course doesn't even want to function properly. The tricks, the half-pipes, the cannon part, this stupid-ass section where no-lifers know how to make shortcuts, these all feel like elements that were thrown together, but nothing really works cohesively. It's a real mess, and it falls apart more often than it sticks together. The glue does not hold. This was a waste of a slot. It feels like they really couldn't think of anything to put here. So, they just threw this in and figured it would work fine without playtesting. At the risk of repeating myself, I didn't play much Mario Kart Wii. I got it after 8 Deluxe came out, but I hardly remembered this course. However, I did get some testimonials from people who did play Mario Kart Wii more than myself, and more often than not, No, this course isn't even fondly remembered, which furthers the mystery. Why bring this course back? It makes zero sense why DK Summit is even in the game. D-. And with that, whatever that was, out of the way, we move on to Yoshi's Island. And it's really good. It's a lot of fun. This is one of those where if it wasn't for the Yoshi theme, it wouldn't be anything too special. It's rich in its themes, very rich, and it's all kind of compacted together. One moment you're underwater, and then all of a sudden you're driving on some clouds. It's pretty fast-paced. Functionally, however, it's nothing too crazy. While there's next to nothing in terms of pure straightaways, I think a lot more could have been done to spice up the variety for the race. Mainly what you have are big turns and that's it. There aren't any alternative or split paths. The only major thing is this winged cloud that makes a bridge appear, but trying to hit it is a bitch. Yeah, it gets you to the goal line faster, but if one person hits it, then everyone is going to take it. It only makes a difference if the front half of the racers miss the bridge, and the second half can drive on it. But I don't know, even then I feel like it's a stretch. The actual theme though, wow, it's like you're racing on the title screen of the original SNES game. You go through so many different styles in the blink of an eye that you can easily miss it. You go from grass, to water, to cave, to mountain, to sky, all in one lap. I like the enemies that were used, and that the coin is different. Take that, Hyrule Field. It also gives bonus points that won't affect the overall score for exposing one of the best Mario games, and yes, Yoshi's Island is a mainline Mario game, to more people. It's a great track, a lot of fun, but I wish it could have been a bit more expanded. It's a cool concept for a track that works for the most part. Well, the cup's a B+. I guess the Moon Cup was the anomaly being an S-tier cup. It would be a lot higher if, once again, it wasn't for DK Summit. Even without that, I think it would have gotten an A+ at best. Regardless, I will throw in my suggestion yet again. Oh! Would you look at that? It's another DK course. And it's in the snow. And it's from Mario Kart DS. What's it called? DK Pass. I can't think of a more perfect replacement for DK Summit. They're virtually the same idea, except DK Pass doesn't suck donkey dick. Instead of being the third course based on a snowy mountain, we'd have one based on a snowy mountainside instead. See how much the tiniest pinch of variety can do wonders? It really is a shame it got shafted. Oh well. Oh my god. What is this? This is a work of art. Boomerang Cup starts off very strongly with Bangkok Rush, one of my favorite courses in the entire game. Strangely enough, it doesn't feature a lot of my favorite things that are in a course. There isn't any traffic in the street, but the pure course design is so well done that it stands up on its own. It's a fun track to play. The course makes the player weave in and out of the city, and it's done masterfully. The verticality is there with alternate layered pathways and small shortcuts to look out for. As winding and turny the whole thing is, it's never too difficult that it becomes unfun, even on 200cc. Pretty much all of the track is comfortably raceable. Of all the city courses, and most of them are pretty damn good, this is one of the ones to look at and take notes for some of the best course design in the game. There is nothing here that I can point out that ruins the course or brings down the experience. That all comes down to the game's own shortcomings rather than how the track was designed. It's all about the pure skill of the racers. This is one of the golden standard courses. It's a fine example to follow, and I honor this track with the elusive triple S grade. It's so weird that Toad Circuit gets so much hate, but Mario Circuit does not. They are both standard themed courses from handheld games, so do you like these courses or not? Make up your mind, Mario Kart community. To give Mario Circuit credit, it's a lot more difficult than Toad Circuit, and it's actually from the Star Cup from DS. There's more hazards, and the design is a bit more wild than you would expect. You have Goombas, you have fire-shooting piranha plants, and a Wiggler that becomes active after lap 2, I think. I actually quite like this forested area. The last few turns, wow, talk about demanding. It's almost as difficult as Hyrule Circuit's last few turns, only that it's far better executed and not a complete shit show. For those on 200cc, good fucking luck. The amount of things that can hurt you is almost as much as I think a Bowser's Castle course should have. Not nearly as hazardous as Wii U's Bowser Castles, oh dear god no. But this track is on its way to that level. I have a lot of respect for a Mario themed track being this difficult. A B+ fits it well. Waluigi Stadium is one of the defining tracks of Double Dash. This is one of those tracks everyone thinks of whenever the game is brought into a discussion, and the newest adaptation does not disappoint. All of the elements are there thanks to the half-pipes being reintroduced in the DLC, and there's even new pathways that add some verticality to the course. It's a difficult track. Perfectly difficult, just as it was for the GameCube version, but it being an 8 is a much needed upgrade from those god-awful drifting controls. I swear that drifting in Double Dash courses is like trying to insert a tampon into a pissed-off gorilla. Staying out of the mud is actually possible now, and it's a delightful rush on 200cc too. Once again, I don't have many words to say that's negative. It does its job well at being a mostly faithful adaptation of the original. All it asks of the player is skillful gameplay, and that's really what every course should be about. Solid S tier. The Boomerang Cup concludes with Singapore Speedway, which makes this the first cup to have 2 tour tracks in it. So for those who wanted to say that my booster pass suggestions wouldn't work because of 2 courses from one game being in the same cup, the game itself just disproved you. And wow, just look at it. Singapore Speedway stands out as one of the prettiest tracks in the whole game. They're not shy at all about making a grand presentation out of it. Like Bangkok, there is no traffic, but this course isn't as difficult as the others in this cup. It's pretty relaxed in comparison, so I do think some traffic would have made things more interesting, but there's nothing that makes this a bad track. You'll notice that this course has heavy emphasis on airtime. There's quite a few sections where you're gliding up high and flying way above the streets. It's an interesting design decision. It's not as solidly designed as Bangkok Rush or some of the other tour courses, but it is asking a lot for 2 masterpieces at that level in one cup. It works well enough, and it's fun. Oh, and there's a shortcut at the last stretch, and here I thought they were moving away from this. Anyway, it gets an A+. It's a nice wrap-up for this set of stages. Okay, that's pretty good. Another S-grade cup, and so soon after the last one. Maybe it isn't hopeless after all. Truth be told, there isn't a course I think needs to be replaced here, but since I have to pick one for each of these, we'll say, why not? Mario Circuit. And it'd get replaced with... oh yeah, Mushroom Bridge. There's 2 city tracks in this cup, but neither of them have traffic. Mushroom Bridge would make for 3 city tracks. It would make for 2 tour tracks and 2 GameCube tracks and 1 cup of 4, but I don't know. I think it would be a nice addition to it all. Athens Dash is an unexpectedly good course. Actually, no, it's a great course. It provides a decent challenge with this track layout, and believe me, some parts of it are very demanding. But even on 200cc, there isn't anything that's straight up badly designed. It's a little tough to sight read at first. I really wasn't sure what to think. This is a tour course, but it's hardly a city, at least in the traditional metropolitan sense. Most of the track takes place on the outskirts and in the ruins. There's a part where you go down houses, almost like an European San Francisco. There is a shortcut near the end, which can be problematic, but it's not as bad as some other courses that have already showed up in the booster pass. Overall, Athens is a pretty damn good addition. It's the kind of track I hope returns for a while. It's already a classic. A+. Daisy Cruiser has not changed much over the years. Okay, maybe a little bit. This is another one of those courses people automatically think of for Double Dash. Do I really have to address it? I guess I have to fucking address it. Look, I know this course is based on one of my most hated Mario characters, if not video game characters of all time, but I'm not making that a factor. Daisy Cruiser is pretty fun. Making a cruise ship a racetrack is an interesting idea. I enjoy the furniture being something you need to avoid, but parts like where you fall or keep driving strike me as unclear as to which route is faster, and I always think that should be clearly communicated by course design. It's always been an issue with me since the GameCube. Actually racing on it is a ton of fun wherever you go. 200cc provides a real smooth flow throughout the entire thing. So much fun and you feel awesome for cruising around the whole track. One problem I have that I can't seem to get around is accepting that you can drive through the pool at the start. Back on GameCube, that pool would straight up kill your ass. And yes, that's entirely a me issue. I don't have a lot more to say. It's not missing anything that's truly crucial from the original, it's just Daisy Cruiser. If you liked it back on Double Dash, you'll like it here. There aren't any big reasons to dislike it in the first place. B+. Listen, you know I love my traffic courses. But Moonview Highway was always one of the best tracks in Mario Kart Wii, and in 8 Deluxe, it's no different here. There's a few slight changes that make me think it was watered down just a tad, like these boost pads in the second half are a little too big. It seems to take away from the original design intention if you ask me. And I don't know if I'm crazy, but it seems the traffic has been reduced from the Wii version as well. But they brought back the bomb cars. This damn game that didn't restore the dry desert hazards or the freezing the player on Sherbet Land, they brought back the motherfucking bomb cars. It would have been a crime if they brought back Moonview Highway without one of its most defining features. It's just too bad these unique cars wouldn't be used again for the rest of the game's courses, because I can think of a couple of things. You'll see what I mean later on. Otherwise, Moonview Highway is pretty much restored in a near perfect state. It's fun to race on, it's not too long, and it's not too short. And 200cc is exhilarating. It's always a welcome choice in my eyes. Squeaky Clean Sprint takes place in a massively upscaled bathroom as a racetrack. I like this kind of scene a lot. I explained this earlier. It's part of what makes the Pikmin series so endearing to me. The SMB1 background is charming, and, that's the only positive thing I can say about it. Let's cut to the chase. This course fucking sucks on soap. It sucks badly. It's a Nitro course, totally brand new, and it's just awful. I don't think it can be saved other than rebuilding the whole fucking thing entirely. Or better yet, just trash it into the deep bowels of Nintendo HQ and never let the fucking thing see the light of day again. It's choke points galore and a fair amount of track where you can easily score hits on people, and not to mention the last turn, once again, having a pretty nasty shortcut right there.
Holy the fuck! What is this shit?
I am being so sincere when I say the only thing redeemable is the idea itself. Having a giant fan blow you as you race is a cool idea. Driving in a giant bathtub and down the drain is a cool idea. This track is all cool ideas, but executed poorly. A lot of the miniature shortcuts are barely viable, and it's not the most difficult thing to drive on or navigate, no. But all of the negatives come together to create a pretty unfairly chaotic experience, and it doesn't take much for things to turn sour. The fact that I didn't even know about this path here until much later really shows how bad of a job they did for the course readability. It's remarkable how bad of a job they did. It's definitely one of the worst ones in a while. I'm just in shock. This cup was going so well too. It's like if a buffalo walked into your house and took a fat, disgusting, steamy shit right in the middle of the carpet while staring at you dead in the eye. And you have to deal with it. You have to clean that up. I want to point out, there's a big toilet you fly right over, and that's exactly where this piece of shit belongs. Down the drain, and probably straight into the Piranha Plant slide. E+. It gets an E+ only for the theme. We were close to greatness. An A-ranked cup at least? But no, this track just takes it all out. I'm sorry, the cup is a C+ tier. It's baffling that a brand new Nitro track could be so bad. It was definitely one of the ones they wanted to use to present the cup, but man is it a poor representation. It's really unfortunate. The course being replaced is all too obvious, but what to replace it with? Easily. This would easily make the Feather Cup an A tier, that being Maka Woohoo. Easily one of the best designed courses in Mario Kart 7 and in the whole series, which somehow didn't make it in the Booster Pass. The decision to cut the Woohoo tracks is unexplainable and frankly unforgivable. I will address that for these cups, it is an abnormality for a retro course to end them. And while ridding of Squeaky Clean is enough justification, I would simply have Athens Dash move to the end of the cup, with Daisy Cruiser being the first race, Maka Woohoo being second, Moonview Highway being third, and Athens being fourth. What happened here, Nintendo? What happened? There's a lot you can compare with between the real-world city of Los Angeles and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Both are overly self-indulgent in their own ways, and both have way too many people in them. On the plus side, the Mario Kart 8 version is the least congested LA has ever been. Looking at Los Angeles laps on a bigger picture leaves me with complicated feelings. There's definitely a lot of interesting and well-done elements, but also other things that aren't so well done. From the very beginning, it's evident that this is not an easy course at all. Those first few turns are brutal if you're not seeing them coming, and I don't mind a challenge, but you need to be on guard for it. I find it strange because the rest of it seems to chill out after the initial section. It's also complete with enemy hazards too. A part of me wants to go ahead and say, this wasn't tested too much for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It might be a tour thing, but I don't know what goes into the process of porting these tracks over. Other than that, it's nothing too different from what we've seen of other tour courses from before, especially after how unique Athens was. There's this oil field section partway through which, first of all, what the fuck, Nintendo? And second, there's an interesting path split that interweaves in itself, almost like a miniature Yoshi Valley. It's nifty. This course commits the oldest sin of Mario Kart 8's book of crap design of having a shortcut at the last possible stretch. It's an everlasting and disturbing trend that has well outstayed its welcome. It's one of those things that brings down the whole experience. I want to like it more, but it has more than a few shortcomings. It's a B- with A-grade makeup on. Here's Sunset Wilds. It's a GBA track. To be fair, it's not as bad as some of the other GBA course remakes. It's almost on the level of the Mario Circuit GBA adaptation, just without anti-gravity. It's pretty oddly designed in the sense of it being flat, but having no real big shortcuts. There's tons of little areas where you can catch up and maybe pass people, but overall, this course is like racing an insurmountable wall that's slower than you at times. The hazards are there to spice up the track, but don't make any real impact if you're paying attention. There's really not a big emphasis on driver flair. Everyone is expected to go through the course like everyone else for the most part. It's a very strange thing. I'm just confused as to why this was picked, and not something like, oh, I don't know, Lakeside Park. That one even has a tour version. I'm not the first person to point this out, mainly because it's just a confusing decision, but why was the actual sunset removed? The sun actually set in the GBA version, and the course is called Sunset Wilds. It's in the fucking name. It's like playing the game Bloodborne, but they took out all the blood and replaced it with milk instead. There's even a mod that restores the sunset. Say what you want, but the main devs were lazy if a modder can do it for free. There's no issues with dynamic lighting in the game engine. It's about as slapped together as it gets. Just like how they were slapping each other's testicles. Nintendo dropped the ball. It's a C. Koopa Cape is another one of the fan favorite courses from Mario Kart Wii, and for good reason. It's fun, it's well designed, it feels good to race on, it's got good flow, and all of those aspects are mostly present in this game. There's a few choke points where bombs become unavoidable problems, and I kinda wish that this game allowed for more freedom of play. This game doesn't have the bike's mini turbo thing, and it feels pointless to take half pipes. I appreciate that they're there, but they're just slower all around. Wait a second. Where's the lightning? Why did you remove the lightning bars in the underwater part? I mean, the underwater part is still the coolest part of the whole thing, but you seriously straight up removed the hazards? This is even worse than Coconut Mall's vasectomy. That's also 2 in a row. First the sunset was removed, and now this. This is a hazard penalty. The game developers just cost Koopa Cape a well-deserved S rank. It's just an A now. Thanks, Nintendo! It's still a good course, but please stop neutering courses. Vancouver Velocity is a visual treat. For starters, it's a pretty good representation of Vancouver in real life. The bridge at the start is cool, and I like the idea of going through buildings in racing games. And not to mention the tunnel you go through on the third lap. It's fun to race, too. It's not overly demanding or twisty, it's pretty easy to sight read, and the straights and turns are just varied enough to not allow for too many cheap shots on players. The only sin this track commits is the mini shortcut right at the end, of course. Other than that, it's pretty satisfying to flow through the streets. It could be much better if you ask me. If there was a section on a freeway with traffic or something with multiple split forks in the road, something like that, I feel there's a lot of potential that wasn't truly tapped into. But I appreciate representing a Canadian city in, well, any video game really. It's not one that's quite up to the tour course standard, but it does get an A-, so definitely not bad at all. It also gets an It's Not Winnipeg out of 10. This was the most conflicting cup so far. I had some trouble finding how I feel about most of it. It's a lot of, I like the idea of this, but the execution doesn't feel that special. The most firm course I feel about this is Koopa Cape and how they butchered the underwater section. As a whole, the Cherry Cup is awarded a B. For the course that would be replaced, I have much more confidence in. Replace Sunset Wilds with Toad's Factory. That course was mysteriously omitted from the booster pass, and it really deserved to be playable in 8. I'm blaming everyone who bullied Toad's Circuit back in Wave 1. Breaking news! Toad's Circuit is in Mario Kart World. Maybe that's why it wasn't in the booster pass. Rome Avanti is definitely one of the coolest looking tour courses. On paper, the design has some of the most interesting track routes to offer in the game. You weave in and out of parts of the city several times, and if you really pay attention, you can see just how well done it is. For example, on the first lap you drive on the upper part of the Colosseum. On lap 3, you go directly through the center of the same Colosseum, complete with chain chomp hazards. One of the roads also has changes when you go through it a second time. It adds a lot to a track when there's variables to parts you've already driven through. Going through all 3 sections in one clean go is really satisfying. It's one of the most fun courses in the entire game to race through. There aren't a lot of negatives to point out or nitpick either. It's just, Well, there's better courses, and that is insane to me because it's one of the best Mario Kart courses in the series. I have to give it to Tour. It introduced some of the best the series has to offer. It's just a shame that they all debuted in a horrible Mario Kart game that isn't a main entry. A strong start to the Cup and a very solid entry overall. A+. Is Mario like an Italian or a New York Italian? That's something to think about. Nostalgia bait ho! DK Mountain has always been one of the most overrated tracks from Double Dash. Problem 1, there's a cannon launcher. Problem 2, stupid ass shortcuts that I don't care enough to learn. It's one of those tracks that encourages way too much sweaty and try-hard gameplay for my liking, and I'm not a fan. Being the first Mario Kart track to use this cannon launch thing, I understand the novelty of it at the time it came out, but now, well, you know how much pain this feature has caused me throughout Mario Kart 8, and now the source of it all is back to take up a course slot. There's also a real problem with drifting down the mountain, which is about a quarter of the race, so that's already a great sign. You go down so fast that you get airtime for just long enough for it to lock your controls. So you've either got to brake, or you just hope that you go flying in the right direction. It feels clunky as hell. Sorry, I'm not a fan. It's overrated. The track design in this current day and age is nothing special, and there's more negative things about it that make the course far more frustrating than it's worth to go through. Like how playing on 200cc accentuates the mountain slope problem, but 150cc makes the course better, but it's overall a worse mode. It's not the worst in the game, but it certainly isn't good either. D+. Daisy Circuit is another course I don't care much for. I really don't understand why this one out of all the remaining Wii tracks was brought back. People want to whine about how generic Toad Circuit is. How about this one? No? What are you, a bunch of hypocrites or something? There is nothing special about Daisy Circuit. It's honestly pretty lame. In short, the Fountain Square is uninteresting and mediocre track design. And if the cross-section of it was more interesting, then maybe there would be more to talk about. But there's nothing for me to go off of. If it weren't for the Daisy branding, it'd be one of the most forgettable tracks in the series. Before the last big turn, there's a pretty bad choke point which easily leads to chaotic moments. Bombs are completely unavoidable, blue shell explosions are completely unavoidable, virtually everything is unavoidable in this section. You may as well go outside during a thunderstorm while wearing knight armor. It's got a shortcut where you can glide, which is, I guess, a fine addition. Yeah, I'm really trying my best. What do you want me to say? It's just bland. C-. Piranha Plant Cove strikes me as the kind of course that would be a bit brain-numbing, if anything, but it's certainly a breath of fresh air from the previous two tracks. It takes place at night in some ruins near the sea. It feels like they took a 3D World stage and made it into a racetrack. I'll mention the length. It feels like it's one of the longest courses in the game. Not a bad thing. There needs to be more longer tracks anyway. Even though it's a variable lap system, there's a lot of blink and you'll miss it alternate routes and shortcuts. It's a course you'll need to replay a lot to get the most out of it. The track's design makes for a good challenge. It definitely isn't a sleeper course. There's hazards and some difficult turns. It's pretty balanced at not being too unfairly difficult and not too simplistic. I will point out the strange geometry collision, which has cost me a race or two. I'm not a fan of that, and I think it could have used a bit more polish. My brain wants to call it an uninspired theme, but honestly, when you have 96 courses, there's gonna be some duller ones than others, even if they're perfectly fine. It gets a B+ though. So we have two slightly above average courses and two completely boring ones that would honestly be better off not being in the game. This cup is on the lower end, being a C. For a first in this video, I really don't see a reason why both DK Mountain and Daisy Circuit shouldn't be replaced, so I'll be plugging two suggestions. The first course replacing DK Mountain would be Woohoo Loop. Again, the Woohoo tracks are amazing in every way. There really is no good reason why these aren't in 8 Deluxe in some capacity. You brought back Woohoo Town from the 3DS for the battle mode that's pretty much unplayable in this game, and you made no effort to give the other Woohoo tracks any respect for the booster pass? It makes absolutely no sense. Yes, I know I didn't play 7. I still haven't played the Woohoo tracks in myself, but I have no doubt in my mind that Woohoo Loop would likely be a triple S tier for me, and Maka Woohoo would be just fine in the other cup. Daisy Circuit, on the other hand, would be replaced with Mushroom City. Delfina Square is a better course than Daisy Circuit in every way. It would be a perfect replacement, but I already suggested it. Mushroom City would be super interesting as a modern track. You could have it be a varied lap system where you go through different parts of the city on each lap. It'd be like a tour-style course from the GameCube, and plus, there's no such thing as too many traffic courses. You brought back the bomb car and you did nothing else with it? It's finally time. The final cup of the entire game, the Blue Shell Cup. I have to say, if you're using this icon for a Mario Kart Cup, arguably one of the most recognizable and significant symbols to represent Mario Kart as a series, you'd better bring it. Now let's see if Nintendo themselves can bring it. Well, this is not exactly what I would have in mind. Okay, I get that this is a retro cup. If these were all Nitro tracks, it probably would be of higher quality. I feel like using the blue shell icon for this was a mistake. Let's go through these tracks and I'll discuss it in more detail. Madrid Drive is a pretty damn good track, visually speaking. It reminds me a lot of Sonic Unleashed, Spagonia to be exact. And just like that stage, there's some pretty heavy emphasis on drifting around turns. I would almost say it's paying homage to Unleashed. It's not super challenging, but it's far from being basic. There's a few small shortcuts here and there, and there's some nice variation when you drive through the same parts of the course multiple times. There's no backwards course design, but that's okay. I also have to mention the football stadium, and Nintendo, where is the NFL representation? I know you're a Japanese company, but couldn't you throw us even the tiniest bone? Look at me! Look at what I'm wearing! Maybe in the next game. Alright, so I wrote this before the Mario Kart World Direct. I don't think we're getting an NFL course anytime soon, guys. I think Nintendo just hates American football. But Chargin' Chuck is in the game, so at least I get to play as him. The football stadium is a fun, hazardous part of the track. It isn't too ridiculous with blindsiding you with crap you can't react to, something even great tracks like Waluigi Pinball and Shroom Ridge are guilty of. It's just too bad I don't watch Association Football. And what's this? No shortcut on the last stretch? Very well played, Madrid. I'll give you credit for that. And you're the last tour course in the game as well. You've officially earned my respect. Beyond that, there isn't much to add. I wish it had some traffic in it, but there's nothing terribly bad that I can point out. I'll go and give it a B+. Hey, spoilers! It's the course that's getting replaced. Seriously, this is the cup you're sending the game off, a game that's honestly overstayed its welcome for nearly 10 years, and this is one of the 4 you picked? I'm sorry, but this is an incorrect choice if I'd ever seen one. Anyone, and I mean any, Mario Kart fan could pick out a better candidate for this cup from any of the games. So why did Nintendo think that this was a good idea? This crap came from Mario Kart 7. Let's think about all the other courses from 7 that didn't make it in this game. Have you thought about it? I've already grieved over the loss of the Woohoo tracks, which honestly would have been a great fit here. Daisy Hills is decent, though I don't think it's a good fit to be in the Blue Shell Cup. Same goes for the Cheep Cheep Lagoon. I will say Wario Shipyard would have fit quite well. You could maybe make a case for Shy Guy Bazaar and the Bowser's Castle from 7, but I honestly am not at all familiar with that Bowser's Castle in particular. Still, all of those options are far better than this. For starters, this track represents one of the most overrated and overused characters in the whole Mario series. I have so many issues with Rosalina herself as a character that I could not fit it in this video. It would take its whole other video by itself. Ice World being in the final cup is like wearing a sombrero that a hippopotamus took a nasty dump in. With that aside, this course, speaking from a pure fundamental standpoint, isn't very good. I generally don't have problems with ice courses, but this one starts off with one of the crappiest designed turns in the entire game, maybe the entire series. Racers are given items right before a turn that has a big ass hole. It'd be bad if you fell in, but guess what? The road is narrow, so if you're up front, have fun spending time in Rosalina's Frosted Cooter from hell. I can't believe this was ever thought through, which it probably wasn't. You have an extremely high chance of falling off, either from bumping into the pack or getting the shit smacked out of you with items. It's a lose-lose. The only strategy is to stay behind, that's not how you're supposed to play a fucking racing game. Beyond that, there's nothing special about the course, period. It's like 3 or 4 turns in total with long straightaways, and not much for keeping the player engaged. It's boring, it kinda sucks ass, and I don't even see the connection with this being connected to Rosalina. What does any of this have to do with her? Other than the observatory, which is shoved and jammed in for kicks, when was it established that a Rosalina is linked to ice? Ever? Seriously, ever? Show me any time before 7 came out that Rosalina was associated to ice. You know, if you actually made a course where you race on the observatory as a track, that would be a little different, and you could link it to Rosalina too. What's here is complete nonsense. It's like the designers couldn't figure it out. None of the assets have rhyme or reason. The only somewhat unique thing this course has going for it is the top ice road collapsing after lap 1, which isn't even anything I noticed on my first run since I always played the new tracks on 200cc, so that point is rendered irrelevant for that mode. Even then, it's just a worse Sherbert Land. Of all the ice or snow themed tracks, this is the most uninspired. It's an E. SNES Bowser's Castle fares better than the previous course, but that isn't a very high bar to clear anyways. It's fine, it's just really short, and I mean really short. I'll give credit that's a pretty impressive facelift from the original version, but I do wish that maybe they picked a longer course or another Bowser's Castle altogether. I'm not a big fan of super short courses, as I don't feel they give anybody enough chances for catching up if they fall behind. There is a need for balance. You don't want a super long course that's boring. I also feel like the challenge isn't quite something like SNES Rainbow Road, which was done just right. The new hazards are well implemented in the course, if only a bit unpredictable if you didn't know about them before. I don't quite know how to feel about the little alternative paths towards the end. I don't think they give a huge advantage, if any. Last but not least, there's your last stretch shortcut, the final one of the entire game. What else is there to say about it? The course is decent. In fact, it's a C+ tier, but decent doesn't quite cut it for a Blue Shell Cup if you ask me. Finally, the game is sent off with Wii Rainbow Road. It's a pretty good Rainbow Road overall, a good test of skill. It's vibrant and pretty. It's a Rainbow Road track, so all those previous traits are to be expected. It's definitely a lot better than 64's iteration. The big downward ramp at the start, the 2 big bowl jumps to test how gutsy you are with boost jumps, the split path at the end, it's all super well and tightly designed. It shows how much they knew what they were doing back on Mario Kart Wii. It's no different in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe either. The only shortcomings are from the game itself. The last part of the race being on a road that's shaped like a half cylinder is pure insanity. And there's boosts on here! I would normally complain about there being no items before the cannon launch part of the track, but it is a Rainbow Road. It's the kind of thing that separates these from the normal courses. By now, you should be prepared for absolutely anything. As good of a send-off this is, I have to say, there already was a better Rainbow Road earlier in the Booster Pass. We'll cover that shortly. I don't have anything else to say, it's just a solid track well deserving of the Rainbow Road title. Easy, high S tier. And that's that. That's the Blue Shell Cup. And honestly, it's pretty disappointing. When this was first shown, I had wild expectations for what would be under the Blue Shell icon, and this is what we have, a C-tier cup, brought down by one really bad course. If I had to say, I would alter this quite a bit. Madrid could stay, but you know Rosalina's Ice World has to go. The choice is too obvious. Everybody was thinking it, but Nintendo refused to give it the attention it deserves. Rosalina's Ice World would get replaced by Wario's Coliseum, a stage that needs no introduction. It's one of the wackiest courses in the series, being so long it can only be 2 laps, and the overall design is borderline psychotic. It would fit the Blue Shell Cup absolutely perfectly. SNES Bowser's Castle is fine, but it's just too short. I could point to Double Dash, 64, or Wii's take on Bowser's Castle, or some other generally evil-looking course theme like Banshee Boardwalk. If it were up to me though, I would have much preferred to see Bowser's Castle 3 from Super Circuit. Specifically the Wii variation, either as is or give it the old facelift. Wii Rainbow Road, I would not remove or replace it with anything, but I personally would swap it with 3DS Rainbow Road, as I feel that course is a better way to send off the game as a whole. It's the best Rainbow Road in the series, it's the longest one and the most lively one out of all of them. I won't be too hard on that decision though, because either one works. Hopefully, if there's another Blue Shell Cup in the future, they'll get it right, because this one is a dud. Alright, I swear this is the last time I'll bring up Mario Kart World, because I said this video is not about Mario Kart World. I'm kind of proving myself wrong, but I couldn't help but notice that the knockout rallies have a Blue Shell icon, and, well, I just want to point out that they use both Wario Shipyard and Boo Cinema in the same rally. I swear I wrote this before they even showed anything about Mario Kart World. You have to believe me. That wraps up my thoughts on each and every single Mario Kart 8 course, new and old. With all these grades, we have a rough outline of what my ultimate ranking looks like. This isn't enough though. All my thoughts and all my Booster Pass suggestions aside, it's time to take what we do have in the game and build a definitive list. Just give me a minute here and done. Well, that's surprising. Let's take a look at the Mario Kart 8 courses from worst to best. I'm pleasantly surprised. As much grief as this game has given me the past fucking decade or so, it's weird to think that I enjoy most of the tracks in the game, new and old, with most of the tracks being ranked S tier. I don't really start hating life until about here-ish, in C-. D rank tracks is where I start not picking them, and E and F tracks are bad enough to affect the entire game, as in the whole game would be improved if they were replaced by anything better or removed entirely. F tier tracks are just objectively bad. You will notice my tier list doesn't quite match up with the actual rankings I wrote for worst to best. This tier list is more objective. The course's positions in a tier isn't in any particular order, however, my rankings you're about to see has more personal bias. We all know Dry Desert technically has worse design than Bowser's Castle, Mute City, and Cheeseland, but I'd still prefer playing it over those three. It's like picking the least disgusting pile of beetle dung to eat. So, triple S tier, only 6. These are the elite of the elite, the cream of the crop. The examples that should be studied, everything up here is about as good as it can get. They're all nothing short of near perfection. S tier. It's kind of crazy they're in the majority. These I feel are pretty essential to Mario Kart 8. It just wouldn't be the same if Toad Harbor or Neo Bowser City was cut from the game. They're excellent in their own way with only a few minor blemishes. A+. The high-grade A tiers, not quite as iconic as the S tier tracks, but they're plenty good on their own. The A tracks I like playing on a lot, and A- courses are still great. They just have something here or there that just makes them a little short of greatness. Any A track is a solid choice though. The Bs are still plenty fun too. Some of these look a lot better than they play, Wildwoods being a good example. They don't pull anything that's super annoying or offensive. All good fun and relatively well designed. C tiers. These get rough. I can tolerate C+ tracks. These three are actually short of being in the B- club, but they're either too short or just not up to par to make it. C's are dead center at being average, both of them almost fall to being C-, where down here is where courses do that much more to annoy me. D courses have some big flaws, whether in regards to poor track design or affecting how the actual game is played. Some of them are just boring. Mario Circuit 3 and Tokyo Blur come to mind, and DK Summit is bordering on non-functional. E tracks are just bad. They're bad. The E pluses only have a plus because they function as courses. E tracks do not. These are tracks where the ideas simply don't work well, if at all, and the only track in E- is almost an F tier. The only reason it's not is because it doesn't have huge glaring flaws, like Dry Desert. It's the best of the worst, and only because the track design itself isn't so bad. It's just that when you get so much freedom with boosts and going off-road, that makes it badly designed. Easily with the worst shortcuts in the entire game. The entire course is a fucking shortcut. Cheeseland is, in my mind, the worst regular design track in the game. The shortcut is ridiculous. It's too stupidly difficult to race on anyway. It's not interesting to look at. It fails in nearly every aspect. The only reason it isn't F- is because it still has a design, even if it's bad. F-. If I have to explain to you why these two fucking crimes against humanity are bad, then you haven't been paying much attention. And, without further ado, here's the part you've probably been waiting for. Me ranking all the courses straight from worst to best. And if you skipped here, fucking shame on you. Anyway, let's get to it. At the end of everything, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was created to be an enjoyable game. It only makes sense. Good games generally tend to sell well. It's a bit of a surprise to me that so many of the tracks ended up in the higher tiers compared to the bad ones. It only makes some design choices even more questionable, but in terms of good stages, yeah, I'd say this game delivers. So why is this video only part 1? I've already rambled about each and every course for hours now, and this still isn't enough? No. I'm just getting started. Even if you had the best courses in the series, and I mean all triple S tiers, perfect 10 tracks, Mario Kart 8 itself has some deep-rooted problems in it. No amount of great design can escape the other issues the game presents. These are a whole other psychotic tangle of flaws. Bring your scissors. In fact, bring the hedge trimmers, because that's what we're going to need to untangle this mess. The next time we meet, we will be discussing the other facets of the game that can be altered and improved to make the best Mario Kart 8 that we can. Until next time, I'll be seeing you later. Thank you for watching this entirely too long video. I hope you watched all of it. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you do come back when I get back to this game. I also have some other videos in the pipeline too, and in fact, the next video is going to be me talking about Mario 2. Yes, Mario 2. Anyways, take care for now.